What's up, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to the first ever live broadcast of Final Podcast. This is Final Fan TV. So, we have a very special guest party member tonight. He is responsible for the extremely detailed Final Fantasy VII Lore and Story Breakdown YouTube series titled The Structure of Five, as well as his most recent video, Aerith Dies In Remake, detailing the Material Ultimania and the implications of its contents. The very informative and entertaining Final Fantasy VII lore master, Sleepezi. What's up, man?
Thank you very much. Yeah, going good so far. Thanks for having me. You are so killer on the introductions for everybody. You are on point with that.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. I'm just excited to talk to you, man. I'm actually genuinely excited to talk to you because, like I was telling you in the pre-show, I had just kind of recently discovered your videos back when you posted the Material Ultimania breakdown, and yeah, like I was hooked from the very opening of the video. It was super entertaining. It was very, very informative, and like, man, from the moment that happened, I think Mo, I commented on it or posted about it and said, this is amazing. And Mo was like, you should have him on the show, wink, wink. And I was like, dude, I'm already in the planning stages. so I sent you
up, Mo. I appreciate that. Well, I'm very excited to be here. And as soon as like I came across you, I was thinking to myself, man, it'd be really great to just sit down with these guys and just, have a chat. So the feeling is mutual. Like as soon as you messaged me about it, I was like, of course, I've been waiting for this. Like over here, it was just biding my time. I was trying to get through with the video actually, because I know that we had briefly discussed some stuff in the past, like not in detail, but like you hit me up and I was like off of the planet, which is usually how I am when I'm making these videos. So when you messaged me, I was like, oh, like absolutely 100%. I'm so glad that this video is done and I can just sit down with you guys. So
yeah. Awesome, man. Yeah, that was I messaged you about the Final Fantasy VII special
that's
that
right.
we were doing. Yeah. Yeah, so whoa, watch out now. We got an earthquake. That was just me shaking the desk there. Yeah, no, let me introduce myself. I am Daniel Hofflich. I am your party leader for Final Fan TV. The limit breaker, Vinny McGovern, is away from the computer right now. But he will be joining us in just a little while. But yeah, so that will be our FFtv party members tonight. We may even have the arrival of Reed Daniels a little bit later, but he was really excited to talk to you as well. So I'm sure he won't miss this. He'll be in here soon. Let's get on to the questions. Sleepezi, or should I call you by your real name, or are we just going to leave that anonymous?
Owen is fine. Sleepezi is fine. And anything you want to call me, I will respond to it.
Lore Master.
That's right. That's the preferred title, of course. Of course.
All right. So the first thing I want to say, and I just want to give you some more praise. You covered pretty much everything in Final Fantasy VII's universe, and I mean, no stone unturned, as they say. You make so many excellent and, quite frankly, eye-opening points that I was just hooked. And it was only after 3 or 4 hours of watching it, and I'm like, oh crap, I got to get to bed. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I mean, it was fantastic, phenomenal job. Your first video series, which was the Structure of Five, and that was just, it was so informative. You apply context to every idea, every theory that you come up with, and that was it was just a joy to listen to. Unfortunately, I will say that I've only gotten through 3 out of the 5 videos. So
the better of the series, so don't even worry about it.
Oh man, I don't know. You started talking about Genesis, so I did kind of get. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. That's where people start to turn the attention off, and I totally understand that. We can talk about that too later. Yeah.
Well, here's I do want to throw this out there before we really get started. For my own personal thoughts on this, I will say that this is weird for me as a Final Fantasy VII fan. And I consider myself, just up there as the hardcore of hardcore Final Fantasy VII fans. You know what I mean? Like this is my game. This means a lot to me. And we dedicated an entire, episode to that, like a 2-hour special of how much it means. But that was the original Final Fantasy VII. So it's so weird for me to be in this position where I'm kind of ignorant to the compilation. I mean, of course I've played them, I enjoyed them, for what they were. Like it was just fun, good fun. The movie was cool when Sephiroth fought Cloud again. I just go back to watch that. You know what I mean? That's what I want.
Yeah. Same, by the way, back in the day, same concept. Just the Sephiroth fight was my thing too. So
that was it, right? Yeah. And so I never really dug into the lore, or dug into the compilation lore, I should say, because I mean, when it came to the original, I was all about it. Like I could know that thing in the back of my hand. I was at school, they would call me the living strategy guide. I was, people, I was good, but yeah, so now I'm kind of ignorant on it. When Crisis Core came around, I was not really thrilled with Genesis and like Angeal and these new characters. I'm like, they weren't really meant. They weren't meant. What is this? So to circle back to where the questions will begin. So to circle back to it, like with you, Mo, that's MJ Gallagher, and Baby Seal. Like you guys have collaboratively, oh my God, that was a big word. It came out of my mouth so weird. You have worked on getting me back into, like, I got to get into the compilation. I'm excited about it now. And I have to thank you for that. Like you guys have gotten me excited about something that I really didn't pay no mind to. I was like, this doesn't affect my original game. But now it has, you know what I mean? With Remake, it really has kind of seeped into my original experience. So now I'm like, I have to care. So you guys have done such a fantastic job of detailing this information of the compilation, making it entertaining, making it informative. And yeah, I've learned a lot from you guys. So thank you.
Of course. Glad to help with the compilation stuff. Thoroughly enjoy it myself. So anytime I hear that, I'm just like, yes, understandable. Right. The most important stuff, for people, because you're comparing literally what people regard as the best game of all time to a series of either games, movies, etc., like that don't match up to just like that level of love for anybody. Like I understand people love Crisis Core. There are people who love Dirge of Cerberus. We're a small minority of people.
I love every time you mention Dirge of Cerberus in your videos. Yes, I'm serious.
There's a literal like guilty pleasure that I have. It is like, I do love that game for a lot of reasons. I also hate the game for a lot of reasons, but understandably and objectively, it's probably like the weakest of the compilation. But yes, and also because of that reason, I think it kind of gets disregarded in a lot of situations, which is fine. Again, it's like you shouldn't put like a lore dump of things into a game that just doesn't people don't like to play.
Right. Yeah. It is wild to think that Dirge has so much packed into it that you need to play it, but man, it's just woo.
Yeah, it's like, who does? Who wants to go and do that again? Which is also kind of the point of the videos, is that like what you mentioned is you and many other people like didn't experience the games in this way, or it affected the way that you perceive the OG, or it ruined, for some people, it just ruins Final Fantasy VII for them to even like look at any of that other stuff. And I think that's totally understandable for the most part, because again, comparing it to what Final Fantasy VII is and what that represents for so many people, it's a slog. Like it's a slog to sit down and like have to read like 15 different like Ultimanias and books, and it's a slog to have to go play a game that you don't want to play. So like a part of me was like, who's going to really want to do this? And I was like, I kind of do. So why not just do it? So it part of it is so that you guys or whoever is watching the video doesn't have to go, subject themselves to something like that, and just get the pieces that they that they need to know, in my mind, in a video form. So yeah, taking the bullet, essentially.
After
Well, yeah.
after like starting this podcast, before starting this podcast, you know, Final Fantasy VII was my favorite, still is my favorite. But after starting this podcast and like doing more research and listening to the people talk about like all the deep dive lores that they've done and everything, it going back and playing like Final Fantasy 1 and 2, like I appreciate those a lot more for their simplicity now, because like everything in Final Fantasy 1 is in Final Fantasy 1, and like, you know, it's just it's easier to follow along with. I appreciate its simplicity. Like, you know, just recently I did a playthrough of Final Fantasy 1 where I did one solo white mage throughout the whole game, and it was like one person asked me how I did it, and I was like, a lot of giant gloves. Just have to keep using giant glove over and over again, break the game in those little ways. And then like I used to watch lore videos of the Dark Souls series, and
Vati, right?
Yep, I used to watch Lobos, Vati. Mm-hmm. I used to listen to Bonfireside Chat with those two guys that do that podcast. And the thing about those lore videos and a lot of lore videos is they usually bring about more questions than they actually answer. And that's like super true with Final Fantasy VII and the Dark Souls series, because all of their story is done through environmental storytelling. So it's really left up to you to decide, like, this item was found here on this person's corpse in this area, and you're like, oh man, is this area this place? And you're like, no, I can't. Like just the connections that people make, and I just it makes me think like the game developers were like, let's just not have any story really, and just let the people come up with their own things, and we'll just be like, we'll never tell, you know.
I do, and it's funny that you bring up, because a lot of people ask me like what my favorite game is, and for that very reason that you described, Bloodborne is one of my favorite games of all time, simply because, well, and that game also forces you, unlike Dark Souls, or like there are events that happen in Dark Souls where you're like, well, that's weird, like why is that there? But then like if you skip a cutscene like halfway through Bloodborne, there's just all of a sudden the environment that you've been wandering through is completely changed, and you're like, well, that kind of causes me as the player to be like, what the hell is going on here? You know? So it does, it's the intrigue that those games build. And I think that there's actually some of that in Remake, as you sort of were alluding to with 7. For me, that is why I enjoyed looking into all of this stuff, is that there are like a lot of like smaller details that like I even accidentally came across. I'm just like, the fact that anybody thinks about these things at all makes me appreciate it even more. And that's why I like watching Vati's videos, is that like so many interesting connections made just through like these small just details. It's so awesome.
Did you see Vati's video? I think it was Vati's, where he talks about how Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne are actually could possibly be connected through.
No, but that sounds amazing.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, Aldrich foresaw the age of the deep, and his boss arena was filled with water, and he said that it said that Aldrich foresaw the age of the deep as what Bloodborne's story actually is. Like, Bloodborne is actually thousands of years after the age of fire has ended, and everything, and it's like the age of man all over again, or whatever. I'd have to watch the video again.
The cycle. Are you saying that the cycle repeats? Because that is
gosh.
Wait
a second.
Wait a second. I've heard this before. So one of the questions I have for you, Sleepezi, is actually, as you know, as George Lucas has said about Star Wars, you know, it rhymes, and history is bound to repeat itself. So one of the coolest things about from your videos is you mentioned this. you talk about how even down to minute details like the 8 pillars from the Cetra and then the 8 Mako reactors from Shinra.
Yeah.
There's so much that's repeating, and so much like the contrast of light and dark, and how there's characters that even share the same archetypes, that and they just repeat themselves throughout the history of Final Fantasy VII. And that is, it just blew my mind. It's really cool. So would you care to like kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the cycles of that, it was, so I want to just be clear, like right off the bat, is that a lot of the things that I do come to the conclusion of in any of the videos that I've made were not something I was like, wasn't something I was like directly looking for. It was just like, oh, here's a pattern, and like, let me test this and see if it applies to like either the rest of the game, and then if it goes through that checklist, usually, you know, either right or wrong, then I'll move on to the compilation or something like that and see if it holds up there. So the thought of cycles started with Advent Children, and there's a dialogue between Kadaj and Rufus where it's like these kind of meeting of minds, and like the movie just takes time. This is, I think, in more or less the complete version of Advent Children and the regular release. I think there's a little bit more time spent in complete with their dialogue. But it was just a moment that, like, I guess they decided to give us, where it's like a meeting of these two sides kind of having this conversation about like why things even happen the way that they do. And like, why is like Jenova doing this? Why is this happening to the planet? Why do these things seem to like continuously happen? And one of the things that they describe is like Jenova shows up, and because she wanted to destroy the planet or consume the planet or whatever her goal was, that was sort of thwarted and nothing changed. And that's sort of why I exist. That's what Kadaj sort of goes into. It's like, I exist to like change things for her. That's what will make her happy. And then Rufus just kind of nonchalantly drops like this concept of, well, if like that's the thing that is like the nature of life itself, then things will just keep on repeating. And I was like, that's sort of weird and out of nowhere to suggest that these things continuously are happening. So he's like, if like Sephiroth or any form of Jenova shows up, like you guys will continuously be defeated. So I was like, all right, so this is the first instance of like history repeating itself, which sort of played to me into this idea of destiny. So that was like the first initial kickoff. And then like this is sort of hinted at in OG, where like Bugenhagen has this sort of concept of a fixed destiny, which is elaborated on more in like compilation. But in the OG, he is sort of describing how if it's the planet's will, then it doesn't really matter what people want to do. Like this is something that like he talks about with Red 13 like all the time, is that it's like, look, like even though you want to change things, that might not work out because the planet might not want that to happen. And then he kind of changes his mind after Red sees his father, and he's like, maybe you should just go ahead and try. But in the compilation, he's like, these things are kind of fixed events. So I was like, okay, so that's inside of OG a little bit as well. But then just this concept just starts getting blown up when, well, I guess it kind of came to a head when looking at like the calendar for Final Fantasy VII, which is that the calendar sort of operates on this cycle of 2000 years, where once it hits 2000 years, the calendar goes back to zero and things just kind of, you know, start back up again. And I was like, it's such a weird idea because it's never really explained why this is. But then because a lot of people attribute the new age, which is where Final Fantasy VII takes place, and a little bit of the history of Final Fantasy VII lore takes place, is like from 0 to 7, the year 7 and 1, I think. So it was like, okay, so the story kind of kicks off around the start of a new cycle of this new calendar. And the reason for this, marked in, I guess, the lore, is that people were thinking it was because the Wutai War had ended, is what was the significant change. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a good enough reason for this entire like structure of the calendar to be placed on just like when a war ends or an event. So I guess minor in the grander scheme of things. But we do know something that did start 2,000 years ago, because it's talked about literally all the time, is Genova's showing up. And I was like, okay, so that seems significant. And then it's also this idea of like her life, death, and like rebirth sort of takes place in that calendar cycle pretty consistently.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, so the cycle might be more attached to destiny than I had previously thought at that point. Whereas that, okay, maybe Genovis has a significance in this cycle, and this battle of like coming back isn't as just vague as Rufus kind of mentions it in Advent Children. So there are a couple other things that link itself to this cycle. There's a mention of it in Dirge of Cerberus, where like one of the characters like just very offhandedly is like, hey, like the planet, it operates on a cycle like a circle, and because it's a circle, like we'll see, like they're talking about like their dead like mom or something like that. It's like, we'll see our mom again someday because things just repeat themselves eventually. And I'm just like, so it's all there. It's just not very specific in my mind. So that's sort of the importance of these things, is it is connected to Genova. It's connected to the planet. And I guess the importance of that too is that the live stream has a cycle, as well as Genova sort of being incorporated into that. So none of this is seemingly happening for no reason, I guess, is sort of the idea. And that starts to become way more of a conversation starter when we talk about like remake, which is where people really like, and for lack of a better word, we're very upset about like the inclusion of like whispers and stuff like that, which also I tried to explain in my video series, is like why that conversation is being kind of just brought out of nowhere, where it's like, it's not as out of nowhere looking at a lot of these other elements. Sorry for tangenting, but
no, absolutely not. You're well said. I think if I wanted to like piggyback off of that, when you brought up the whispers, I really believe that, and I'm one of the people that had a really big issue with these things. And I think it's the way that it was presented. And if I to speak for the people who I'm gonna speak for the people here.
Do it.
Yeah, if for like people who are upset with the Reapers, the Whisperers, I think what the whole thing is that it's the way it was marketed. I believe. I really believe that's the thing.
I completely agree.
Yeah, and I think this is the remake you were promised, and it almost felt like a slap in the face. You know what I mean? Like it almost felt like hey, we're giving you the remake. We're even going to call it remake. But here's the, it's a double entendre. I know that. You know what I mean? We all know that. But it's like, this is what people wanted. People wanted the remake, and then it was almost like, hey, you want this to happen, right? No, it's not. Like,
and I totally agree with you on that. And I actually, so what I usually spend my time doing after a video is answering the comments in the video section. And there are a ton of people who are very like, oh my God, like you've done it again. Like this, and this makes sense. And then, but you get people in there. And I've also, and NSP is also somebody who agrees with the opinion that you have on it as well, is that they're just like, look, man, like I get it. Like I see like all of these details, but really what I wanted at the end of the day was the game that I loved to be remade and not fucked with, again, for lack of a better word. And I totally agree with that. Like, and for me, I started off with Final Fantasy VII and Remake and like just this whole binging of like research without really knowing how I felt about Final Fantasy VII Remake. I hadn't come to any sort of conclusion, but the thing that I did know is that the side that you're speaking for is completely justified in being mad about this, because I would be mad if I had put, if I had known that this was going to be a thing, this is like legendary remake was now not the legendary remake. Like, I totally understand that. So anytime that's ever brought up with me in a conversation about it is that all I can say is like, I'm so sorry that this happened to you guys. Like, it's really not as fair as people make it out. And it's not as black and white either. Like, it's a totally justified side of the argument in my mind. So
yeah, and I mean, like, I would go as far as to say, like, they're not actually bad. Like, I love watching your video series, because your video series is almost, it really justifies their purpose, right? And it makes it exciting. You know what I mean? Like, the things that you back it up with, like, here's why the whispers are there. It's exciting. The story is continuing. It's exciting. But I think what it is the illusion that we were going to be given a remake. So I think if it was marketed as like, hey, this, well, obviously you can't really do it, because I mean, you're going back to the time of Final Fantasy VII. But if it was like open and honest about it, like, so if they would say like, hey, we're going back to the time, it's probably not going to be what you remember, or something like that. But I feel like when people were promised one thing, and then the whispers come in and really literally be a meta thing about, this is what you want, but you're trying to make it stay the same, but you're not going to get it. I get what they did. It was very ballsy, and it was like, as I believe Maverick said in the chat, it was very ballsy. And I think that's almost like what they were trying to do. They were going to go for this huge twist, and they're like, as they're developing it, they're probably like, oh my god, we're totally going to, like, this is going to be the biggest twist in gaming, nobody's going to see it coming. And then it backfired for some, and it totally hit the nail for others. But yeah, so I feel like there's two sides of the coin here, where some people love what they're doing with it, it's completely unexpected now, and then some people are just on the side of things where they just really wanted their remake to be just a modern remake of their favorite game of all time. And that's where the bitterness comes from. Like, you're never going to get that. Like, that's never going to happen.
Well, and sorry, just to really quickly, because I think that this is where, from my perspective now, so like, I again, going into this, totally not really wanting to be swayed either way. That was my intention of going in, is because I had heard a lot of people talking, well, this is amazing, or this is like, this doesn't make any sense. And I had just finished it, and I was sitting there thinking about it. I was like, I'm not really sure about it either. I don't know how any of this actually makes any sense yet. And that was the thing, is that nobody could give me a proper answer to any of the details as to why things were. There's like this meta of the ghosts, all these like outstanding questions, like, is time just being like changed completely? Like, Zach lives, like, so many like very controversial elements all being stuck in very quickly at one time, which again, from my perspective, it's like, this is supposed to feel jarring, but there has to be some sense to this. So after, like, just to not to like skip like 100 chapters here, but one of the things that I kind of arrive on at the end of Structure of 5, and kind of the reason I stopped numbering the series, I would say that like the most recent video is definitely like supposed to like stand on the head of like the Structure of 5. But the reason why I stopped numbering them or including them in that same series is because I had kind of said everything that I needed to say about it, because I actually do think that they are going to be relatively faithful to the original. And that's just because of a lot of the structure that is put into place in Remake, and just with certain elements that I've sort of talked about in my videos, where it doesn't seem like they want to go off course necessarily, but it really, because it's very intentional, all the things that they did at the end. But at the same time, I feel like what they would prefer to do, rather than making a 1-for-1, and this is just my my thinking on it now, so like, take this with a grain of salt. Anybody who's taking this as like maybe a fact, we won't know until it's out, but I think they're trying to expand on the central conversations brought up in OG, rather than just retelling those stories. You know what I mean? It's like, we all have like these very like a pretty clear understanding of like how the story of OG works, what the central themes are, all this other stuff. So to make a remake and not expand on that conversation would be a little stagnant in my mind. If you could instead make those topics bigger and get into more of a discussion about like probably like a perceived like life and death. We talk about that a little bit pre-show as being like a central theme of the game. Why not expand those themes to cover a bigger range of emotion or a bigger range of topics and ideas? There's this, and this is actually my favorite one, is that Remake does this really good job of talking about like togetherness, which is something that my part 6, I will refer it to for now. The Aerith Dies video is what I bring up, is that there's this central theme of power coming together, people wanting to protect themselves in the power of friendship, and that's what's going to ultimately complete the task of destiny or whatever it is that they're trying to set out to do. Like they're going to free themselves, where this is a concept that's kind of hinted at as like an overall theme of the compilation and all this other stuff. But the idea is to not use that as like, that's just the beginning and end of a conversation. It's actually the conversation that should extend throughout the entire remake series and have that be something that you expand upon in future installments. So all I see, I'm sorry that this is all over the place, but the point that I'm trying to arrive here to at it's that these ideas are all just going to play back into the things that people already love about Final Fantasy VII, rather than trying to take away something that people really like. I actually really enjoy the idea of Destiny being a conversation starter for making things more interesting for OG's already brought up topics, so to speak. So I guess at the end of the day, it's more about just, again, making a game that's super iconic, more like central to like getting people to focus on why people love this game so much, is because the topics that they bring up are so deep and very like emotional too. Like the game has like a running theme of like emotion in Remake 2. And I think that all carries on in the game. I'm trying to think of and I think I bring this up I'm sorry to tangent again, but there's this thing that's happening in Remake where the very first line that Sephiroth says to Cloud is to hold on to hatred, right? And we know that that's a pretty particular thing that happens in Advent Children. He uses those emotions against Cloud to sort of like get him to be weak so that he can kind of just make him more of a puppet. So he's telling Cloud to hold on to that hatred at the beginning of Remake. Barrett uses that same advice to Tifa in Remake, is that when the plate falls, Barrett's like sees that Tifa's like really upset, and he says, look, like hold on to the hatred and use it against Shinra. And I think that that's the worst advice that he could have probably gave her, is that because Barrett hasn't handled any of the things that have happened to him, and he's holding on to the same hatred about, from, I think we all know the backstory of Barrett, but that's all stuff he hasn't dealt with. And now he's telling her how she should deal with it. And Sephiroth, the villain of the story, is using the same way and method to try and convince Cloud. So my point is that these are all things brought up in Remake that will probably be elaborated on later, is that these negative feelings, emotions, and things like that are all set up to be more elaborated on. So
yeah, I mean, and like you touched on the like the themes of Final Fantasy VII. So I'm going to just go ahead and bring that up now. Yeah, people, it's a hotly debated topic with a lot of people who are concerned that Final Fantasy VII is kind of losing its way. I've seen this in comments a lot. And I'd be curious to, and of course, your video, the Aerith Dies in Remake video, is such a I just encourage anybody who thinks this to go watch that video, because how you break it down and how you explain it it would ultimately lead to a satisfying, like it would not, obviously not satisfying to watch one of your favorite characters die, but but they need to, right? Like it
Right.
needs to happen. So yeah, like I feel like this is ultimately going to, it's going to fulfill what Final Fantasy VII is all about, like life and death. To many people, these are the core themes of Final Fantasy VII, and most importantly, the significance of death and its impact on people. And I think that people get a little worried because with the expansions of Final Fantasy VII, you have, I mean, I couldn't tell you. I'm trying to think. Maybe Don Corneo still dies. I don't like who's actually dead. Like Rufus is still alive in Advent Children. Zack lives at the end of Remake. Aerith, will she die? Who knows? Sephiroth is living on in the live stream. Biggs is alive at the end of Remake. Jesse is maybe alive. Wedge too. Who knows? So I think where people are kind of getting a little worried is, is Final Fantasy VII losing its way with this, like with the alternate universes or alternate timelines and things like that? I'd be curious to hear like your thoughts on that now. Obviously, I highly recommend everyone go check out the Aerith Dies Material Ultimania breakdown that Sleepezi does. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on that?
So I think, again, and this is something I really, really, really try and like stress in this particular video, because I think we kind of look at this game in a vacuum, because we weren't really expecting, like, even when the game was announced, we were kind of like, oh my God, we're just going to get all of it, right? We're going to get the beginning and end of the story. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be 5 discs and it's going to be perfect just the way that it is. Whereas once it came out that these were going to be segmented parts, there was a part of my brain, and this is, again, without having like the knowledge of, what was going to happen or compilation lore like stuck in my brain at this point, is I was like, okay, well then what's probably going to end up happening is you're going to get these individual arcs for each game. You're going to get the Midgar section of the game and that arc. But overall, and then you're going to have part 2 with whatever arc it has. But there has to be this overall theme and arc that runs through each game consistently. So one game has to set up the arc for either the rising action of a story, which is sort of like how they describe a good story is that you kind of have this rising action, falling action, and then some sort of resolution to the story. So that's the way I see Remake Part 1 is that this is the beginning of the journey, and that the real downslope. So the downslope in that game is probably Platefall, and then their rise to like challenge destiny, right? Is that there's a question of destiny. Now we need to like face this thing, and then you have a quote unquote like resolution of that story. But there needs to be a carryover into the next game, and they kind of set it up to be a little bit more ambiguous. But for me, I think that it's just all of the things needed to be introduced in this one game properly. I think you made a Star Wars connection, and yeah. I think about Star Wars a lot when I think about this particular trilogy or whatever this is going to be. Is that when Force Awakens came out, and I don't know how anybody feels about this new Star Wars lineup, but I'm just going to go ahead and express my thoughts on it.
I'll be very happy to tell you.
Okay.
I love talking about Star Wars. So
okay, perfect.
Let's dive in.
Let's dive into Star Wars. Welcome to Star Wars TV podcast. Right? The idea here is that they started the trilogy off having absolutely no idea what they were going to do. They had a lot of setup for something, but the thing that made it suffer eventually, in my mind, is that they relied on a structure of something that had come before it, and then they didn't stick to that structure. So instead of having this consistency through each movie, like each part of the new trilogy is like a complete like disconnect. It doesn't flow into one another very, very well, because you have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different ideas trying to do something different with Star Wars, and it's not a complete idea. With Remake, it's doing the same thing that like Force Awakens is doing, where it's introducing a lot of concepts that we are already very familiar with and injecting some new ideas, which you can think of maybe as like the new characters, right? As like a 1-for-1. But it's about being now consistent with those ideas and themes going forward. So the thing about Remake that I love so much is that it actually does a really, really good job of putting each piece to be resolved later. And I'm not talking about at the end of part 1. I'm talking about at the end of like whatever this is going to be, this overall story. So like a big question that comes up for me a lot of the time when I get asked like this is that, well, why is Destiny still a conversation? We just defeated this large harbinger that's supposed to be the manifestation of destiny. The point that I bring up in my videos is that it's not about destroying destiny per se. It's about targeting corruption in the live stream, which is sort of an illusion without getting too ahead of myself, is an allusion to things brought up in the compilation that Sephiroth is contaminating the live stream. So the goal of this game was to free the Whispers or Destiny from Sephiroth's control specifically, not to destroy the overall concept of it. And this is sort of alluded again, and this is why I did this video, this most recent video, is because after the Harbinger's defeat, we see the Nebula at the end of the game. And the Nebula in the Ultimania is described by the developer, by Nomura, and also the art team as being Sephiroth's wing. And that wing specifically is the conversation that comes up the most in the compilation. You have Genesis's wing, you have Angeal's wing, you have that conversation in the compilation all over the place. So when we get to this part where Sephiroth is like, I want to become a part of this thing, this hasn't happened yet. This is all alluding to the bigger story. And Hollander's wing, thank you, Gene. The idea there is that's even after the Harbinger's defeat, the developers are trying to say to the audience specifically that this conversation of destiny and where this is going has not resolved itself. So I would say that although it's very easy to look at Remake and think of it as this one contained thing, is that it is very, very, very far from being done, this entire thing. And the developers seem to have this very clear awareness of setting up a bigger conversation. So before we all jump onto the one bandwagon of like, this is either going to suck or it's going to be amazing, I think we need to see, because we now know that something new might happen, right? I would say sit tight for part 2 is all I would say. I wouldn't say people change their minds if they're like just not interested in the series anymore, but I would say I'm reserving judgment for myself, having done some of the research for the compilation. So
yeah, and I mean, I'll go back to your videos again.
Looks like
Hey,
Daniel.
Vinny.
Hey, how's it going?
Did I freeze?
Yeah, you
did. Your audio
Okay.
cut out and you froze.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. We just didn't hear you started your response. We didn't get to hear what you were saying about it though.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so I was saying that I love having you're going back and watching your videos, and I'm loving having you on the show because of this reason. If you go back and you watch your videos, you genuinely, or at least I'm speaking for myself here, as someone who played the original, had these feelings, or not played the remake and had these same exact feelings of like, oh man, what are they doing? And going back and watching your videos, talking to Mo, seeing Baby Seal and his theories and stuff like that, and breaking down the lore of it, it's really exciting. Like if people would just give it a chance, give this a chance. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII, I really do believe that you could get into this. Like you could be like, okay, this is actually, really, really cool stuff, and it's really intricate of how they're doing it. And it's almost like I'm watching Game of Thrones again, like where you're like, you're thinking about the history and like, okay, well, this is gonna happen. You're theory crafting and everything's really cool again. You're excited. I think it's just that uncertainty that really gets people unsteady, where you're just kind of like, do not mess this up. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, now
Game,
that's where it is. If they mess this up, then no one's going to trust them for the rest of their lives.
Exactly. So you have, like, if you Game of Thrones with the final season, you're just like, don't mess it up. And even I'll refer to Star Wars in the same vein here. But I think where you draw the line between these two comparisons is that those are continuations of the story. Whereas Final Fantasy VII Remake is a unique scenario where it is a continuation of the compilation. I mean, it's clearly a continuation of the compilation, but we're just kind of going back to a period in time which just so happens to be your favorite game of all time, and that's when it's kind of like, hey, this is sacred ground that you're stepping into right now. Whereas Star Wars, if I go back to that, my opinions are much like yours, where I absolutely love Force Awakens. If I can get that out there, like Force Awakens was
it's
so
a good movie.
Yeah, it's so good the way they build it up. But again, that's Star Wars. We can get into Star Wars TV, Star Wars fan TV. But yeah, so it's kind of a continuation. So nothing was written. You know what I mean? Like, so if Rey can do a cool force power that, like, hey, that's new. But there's nothing written saying that it couldn't happen. It's happening in the moment. Whereas Final Fantasy VII Remake is kind of like, this has happened and you're going back, and it's kind of like, please don't mess this up. Don't, Aerith needs to die and everything like this. And like, things need to happen the way that you remember them. And it's uneasy. Like, it makes people feel uneasy. But to go back to the Star Wars thing, there is a question that I do want to ask you, because I feel like Star Wars is such a, obviously it's a very influential, franchise. Here's my question for you, man. And this is what makes me super unsteady when we.
Give me both. If I know where you're going with this,
I think you do. So, like, Sephiroth kind of has this Anakin-like story going on, where you get, he's a hero of a previous war. Anakin, the Clone Wars, Sephiroth, Wutai, and he turns evil. He wants to rule the galaxy, and all this stuff. And the way that it's kind of leading up to, and gets me a little nervous, is Sephiroth going to have a redemption arc? Like, is he going to be redeemed at the end of this? And I feel like that is what after watching your videos, I can sense it. Like, I can sense, okay, so he, I've read On the Way to a Smile as well, where it's like he gets rid of all of his memories of being a good person, basically. But will he regain those somehow, like, and then go, oh, wait a second, there's still good in me, like Anakin or Kylo, which I really believe was a bad redemption. You know what I mean? Like, so you get kind of that is it, man, is he going to be redeemed at the end? And then is he going to turn around and end up helping the party defeat the greater threat, which, could be Minerva, and things like that. Maybe even, please God, no. Genesis.
Yeah, exactly. Genesis being the,
sorry. Everybody gets together to hate on Genesis, and that's what redeems Sephiroth.
That's what redeems. Like, okay, cool.
That's where they can all agree on this character was shit.
So for me, like, Sephiroth, obviously, I'm wearing the shirt right now. You know what I mean? Like, so Sephiroth is one of the all-time greatest villains in video game. Like, I don't think it's arguable. I mean, he's at least one of the greatest villains in video games of all time.
Yeah. Iconic, at least.
And it's like, please, he doesn't need to be redeemed. What do you think of that? Go ahead, Vinny. I'm sorry, real quick.
I was just gonna throw in, personally, I'll probably get to catch heat for this. Like, I love Sephiroth, but I feel like Seymour is actually one of the best driven bad guys, because I feel like it's like the same thing. Like, there's a mother-son relationship thing going on with them and everything, but like, I feel like he has, like, similar to Sephiroth, but just like more pure hatred.
Well, now I guess in the compilation, I think Sephiroth probably overtakes at this point. Like watching Sleepezi's like videos and stuff, and you get like the sense of like at the same time as I sense that he's going to be redeemed, I'm also seeing like, oh my God, he is probably at the most badass, like most epic
super
villain.
evil level that
Right,
he probably
yeah.
has been. I can't speak on 10, and this is something I caught heat for, actually, but I don't disagree necessarily. I think they kind of filled different roles, but I also don't have as much of a familiarity with 10 as I do 7. And I will say, just on the record, that the only game I really know about Final Fantasy 7 or Final Fantasy related is 7. So anytime anybody brings up 10, or that I need to play 10, or like any other game, like you were mentioning gloves from Final Fantasy 1, and I was like, I have zero idea what you're talking about, but I was like, that sounds impressive, like a white mage run. I was like, all right. But anything outside of like the realm of compilation or 7 or anything like that, I have a very, very, very minor understanding of. But I do know about Seymour. I think he definitely seems like an interesting villain, but I would definitely I will say on the record also is that I really don't think that Sephiroth is a redeemable character, nor would. So, okay, this gets brought up a lot is that it's like in Remake, there's a lot of, talks about how they wrote like in that end, but there's a lot of things that I like about Remake just on a character level, like how well things are sort of set up, delivered. There's a lot of very well written characters with some understanding of like exactly who these people are, and a very like clear understanding of like what their purpose is in the story. It's like the developers get it. I feel like I think they get Aerith. I think they get Tifa. I think they get Cloud. It would be a massive mistake in my mind to think that they don't understand exactly what Sephiroth's role is in like the story and how he needs. If anything, I want him to be dialed up. But I would say that there is room for something else, not to like have him be redeemed, but and we can segue into this because I think it's probably like a pretty good way to do so, but I'll let you handle that part. Is that for instance, with like an idea of like a Sephiroth game is like, I wouldn't want to be like, oh man, this guy's eventually going to become good. But what I would really like to see is maybe like, because Sephiroth's backstory is kind of awful. Like it's not a good situation for somebody to be in, to like find out that you're just an experiment. I would like to relate to like the chaos going on in his life prior to him becoming just the worst person, the strongest villain imaginable in the series. I don't want him to be redeemed. I want him to fill the role of a villain better than he ever has for Remake. Right. I think that there's also a lot of evidence to just say that like he's so off the deep end with that. Like he's just gone way, way, way too far. He's way less human than I think he has been in quite a bit of time. And I think that's the disconnect and the strength of his villainy in the story is that he's so removed from being a human at this point. There is some difference at the edge of creation with him too. And I think that's where a lot of this redemption arc thing started. I think him being more self-aware is also totally fine. I just don't see him coming back. And whether or not he's the true villain of the story, I think he should have a part in that. I think the main conversation when we start talking about Minerva, and if anybody is not familiar with that, is Minerva is like the will of the live stream personified. So when we bring up Minerva, all I say to somebody is that it's probably just best to look at it as like the will of the planet, which is the same thing that we were talking about with the cycle. Is that that's the impediment that's really coming in to like allow these things to stay the same. It's the same reason why in the original Holy will just kill even human beings. Is like that's a huge threat. Like we're making this known to the audience that even the goodest of good is also sort of working against people. It's already working against the party in the original, and maybe making that more clear to the audience that these sort of structures aren't really for the benefit of anybody but the planet or the benefit of Sephiroth. It has nothing to do with what the individual wants, which is kind of something, and again, not going too far into it, is why I think the colors are like yellow and purple in the video are so important, is because it sort of pits this again back to an arc for part 1, is that it's showing Shinra in that same way. It's like, why do we need this structure? Like, why do we need to rely on this corporation to do like to like do anything? Like, this is ultimately hurting us. And the larger conversation may be playing into that same idea when it comes to the live stream is like, why do we need Destiny to like oversee like how things are run? Like, can we do a better job? So again, starting in a smaller conversation for part 1 and maybe having to work into that when maybe the weapons are introduced or the concept of holy. So I think it's Sephiroth being the villain. And also, yes, I would love to see like the live stream be put more in a negative light as maybe something that needs to be dealt with in that sort of realm, is like that they're also working against the party.
Well, like Aerith overthrows Minerva type thing.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
there you go.
Since I didn't watch the Minerva video, but
That's fine.
So is there a connection between Minerva and Elena from the Turks? Then do you make a connection in your video, because the Minerva band is stolen from Elena, right?
So yeah, that's the funny thing is that there are allusions to the equipable item. The connection doesn't really come down to that particular like level, I guess. There's actually like a running use of the language of like Minerva, and like the goddess band, I think, is also something that exists, or the headdress. I can't remember the language. You said, I don't even actually know about, so this is a stealable item. I think I've looked this up before, but refresh my memory.
Each of the Turks have a pretty unique item that you could steal from, and the Minerva band, which I think is just to boost magical power, and it has double growth in the materia slots as armor, but it's stolen from Elena, who's part of the Turks, and she's the newest member of the Turks, and she's kind of immature, childish, like not grown up or anything. So she hasn't like come into her own yet at this part of the compilation. So like I said, I didn't watch your video, but I didn't know if there was like maybe a connection between Minerva and Elena, being that Elena is the one that you would steal the Minerva band from.
Right. I actually haven't even made that connection. So you bringing that to my attention. I will look into that. The connection between, so like to sort of segue into like detail, I guess, is that it's not between Minerva from Crisis Core to the Turks particularly. It's actually a connection between the Benora apples to the associated color of purple, which has like a purple flower, which is something that gets brought up in Remake. So I'm going to very quickly walk through this, just because I think this is also a part of something that we wanted to talk about anyway, is that I think we all noticed that in the Harbinger fight, you see the it got changed in the US version. Is that something that actually happened? Clarify that, Schrodinger. I don't know if that's the case or not. But
changed in the US version.
Harbinger, the Harbinger in Remake has this purple eye and this purple glowing chest. And what ends up happening is I was looking into those colors, right? Because it seems weird that the Harbinger glows purple, and then like right after that, Sephiroth becomes like this purple, like glowing ball. I was like, why is this happening? So I was like, okay, well, maybe this color association, sort of like how yellow is associated with like Aerith, maybe there's like a continuous like use of this color to associate with like evil or something. I didn't really know if that was going to be the case or not. But then when you watch the opening cutscene for Final Fantasy VII Remake and the alleyway, you can see, you know how like the one wing angel thing plays, like it just hits and then Aerith turns to the alleyway is like frightened. That the back of that alleyway is lit purple. And then it's actually in the very next cut of the scene. So the idea is that from the very beginning of the game, the developers are trying to tell you that these colors are kind of an associated concept. So And then that's also in the Matic Spectre fights. Like anytime there's like that whisper that's controlling the other whispers, it's also glowing purple. So that concept sort of keeps carrying through. And then it comes down to a purple flower that is on Rufus's coin, which is talked about by developers as being like an association to fear, which is something that Sephiroth uses like in the compilation as a way to get to Cloud and such. And then it also shows up on the picture where President Shinra is shaking the mayor's hand before, like he's wearing the same purple flower on his shirt. So the idea is that the developers are making like this very clear distinction between like these two concepts of fear being used by Shinra, fear being used by Sephiroth. And then Minerva has an association to this purple flower in Crisis Core because the Benora white apples that grow are actually flowers first, like on the trees. So the idea is that the reason why the apples are purple, the purple flower is there. So I was thinking to myself, well, that's weird because this character is associated with the Cetra because she has like green eyes and all this other stuff. But her headband, ironically enough, that you brought it up, her headband in the cutscene has the color yellow and purple, which is again these dueling ideologies sort of coming together. And it's not on any other part of her dress. Like the purple is specifically only used visually for her in that moment, and with the flowers she's associated with. And I do this whole thing why the Benora apples is like only grows in Benora because Minerva's kind of just present because they grow at different times in the year, and it's only kind of when she's there that they grow probably. And then also Benora apples showing up in remake and posters and stuff like that are just like further allusions to maybe these two concepts being similar. So there is a connection there between like evil Cetra or evil Minerva, the planet being associated with fear, Sephiroth being associated with that, and so on. So I'm just only reason I went into this is just to like that's an overview of like the first two videos. That's like 2 hours of content, I think, kind of boiled down. So.
and you go even deeper into that, like that ideology of like purple and yellow, and it's super fascinating. Even down to like you breaking it down frame by frame during the VR sequence, and you're just like, look, purple flowers are popping up. You know what I mean?
Yes,
as the live stream
crazy. I forgot about that one. That's exactly what happens. Like, literally, the live stream passes over them, and like just purple flowers are being brought up. I'm like, this is such a crazy. Like,
I didn't notice it. I did not notice that. I mean, of course, I noticed that flowers were there. You know what I mean? But the yellow flowers are already present, and then the purple flowers start popping up as the live stream passes through. That was so cool. Just really, that's the kind of detail that you get out of your videos. And I mean, obviously, I feel like the people here right now watching live, I feel like they know you well. So I'm sure they've
unfortunately,
I'm sure they've seen your video. But anybody listening to this that may not be familiar with Sleepezi, definitely check out these videos, man, because you really get some in-depth, detailed breakdowns. So you did talk about your fascination with purple and yellow, and it's definitely covered a lot in your videos. So I won't go into that right now. Even though I just love that. I just love that you bring up this fascination with purple and yellow, and you're like, you know how I feel about this.
Yeah, I get a little crazy about it.
So can I
yeah,
just before Daniel goes into his next thing, like I'm super into lore and everything, but I'm also I'm more into how games mechanically keep continuity. And so this next thing, because you seem like you have a lot of knowledge on just this, like this part in particular, more than anybody I've spoken to. But so for continuity wise, this game is broken up into multiple parts. Now, level 50 was the max level, right? In Remake Part 1. I believe you couldn't go past level 50.
Yeah.
Level 50,
So at the end of Remake Part 1, you fight this colossal, gigantic cosmic space god, and your team, kicks butt.
Right.
And then the beginning of Remake Part 2, you're probably going to be fighting like level 1 coyotes getting your ass kicked. So Like, do you have any insight on how you go from being, god killers to like, I think I need to run away from this goblin fight because I don't have enough potions?
That is a big thing that I have been sort of silently mulling over. Like, I haven't really like talked about that openly because I think that I think that's where most people get hung up. And I think that that's a very good and accurate way of like, that's a good question because I think, and just in this conversation, like Vinny, and I'm sure you too, Daniel, is that it's more about like, you guys know the ins and outs of like the game. The game is like the fact that you brought up the Minerva band is I don't know as much about those details, like where I'm more looking at it from like a lore perspective. I enjoy the games as they are, and I know like the minimum of that, I would say. But the fact that like there have been several people who come up and ask me like what that is. There are a couple of lore reasons why there would be like this sort of odd switch in modes, like going from like being a god killer, as you said, to like killing coyotes. But I don't see, and this is where I kind of like think to myself, is the lore satisfactory of an answer to that question though? Like, would you like, even if I had an answer, which I have several, but like, would that actually satisfy anybody going into part 2?
Well, I think I'm sorry, Vinny. Go ahead, man.
I was gonna say, like, at the end of the day, sometimes you need to chalk your answers up to it's a video game and this is how they wanted to go with it. I mean, sometimes that is the answer, and sometimes it's just like, all right, it's a video game, this isn't real life, so they're gonna go from killing gods to killing coyotes just to keep the challenge. It is a video game, and if there is a solid answer for it, then honestly, I would take any answer at this point that just makes sense.
Right.
So Gene says, I think the idea is that they were in a different dimension, and
I've heard that too.
Yeah,
there is a lot about the singularity that gets very crazy of a conversation, and it's something I bring up very lightly in the most recent video, is that there's this idea that there's this event happening in this particular area that kind of explains why, is because the developers refer to like the battle with Sephiroth. Like, as soon as Sephiroth shows up in the singularity and he's like, I'm just like gonna fucking throw buildings at you, and here comes a train and all this other stuff, is referred to as Advent Children, Cloud and Sephiroth. Yeah. So there is this idea that what's happening here is sort of like a meeting of two different sort of, I don't want to say, I'm not going to say dimension. I think that there's a reason why, though, that Cloud is able to do more of what he's maybe more associated with in like other titles. But again, for me, see, now this is where it's sort of like an opposite answer than I think you're looking for, is that I think from a gameplay perspective, it can be satisfactory to have an answer for the lore. I think it really needs to come through though in like the way that they break this down, and doesn't feel like you're just picking up again from like the peak of Remake Part 1 and just being like, okay, now we're going to simmer down a little bit. There has to be like a proper slope into that game that is both explained through the lore, but mainly through the way that it's delivered in gameplay. Because even if there is a good lore explanation, it has to be done properly through storytelling for that to make me feel like I'm getting some sort of resolution to this properly. Or a reason why, for instance, like Aerith, like this, I think NSP asked me this. He's like, why is the next thing that happens not going to be Aerith just telling them everything that she knows, right? The thing is that it doesn't look like she knows anything anymore. Like, Tifa's like, well, what do we do now? And then she looks at Aerith because she has had all the answers up until then, and she just shakes her head. She's like, I have no idea what's happening now. And I think that has something to do with her disconnection from the planet at this particular moment, which is also something that's brought up in my series, is that I think she's kind of made herself an enemy of the planet, so to speak, for doing what she's done. And there's a plethora of other explanations to this idea too. But I think the idea is that they're going to want answers and just not get anything out of her because she's just not going to know as much. And also, we're not really sure how much she does know either. So maybe an explanation can't really happen until like later.
One of the things that you bring up in your video is how Aerith is, obviously so conflicted throughout the whole game. She knows things, but she also just doesn't know what to do. Like she has this feeling of like, okay, I know what I might be able to do, but I don't know if I should do it because I do not know where it leads. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And like you said, like when you get this disconnect from the planet, and I think she might have gotten that after opening that portal, and it's kind of like you have deliberately disobeyed me, as Mufasa would say.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you get that, and maybe she is cut off from it. To circle back to your question, Vinny, I would like to maybe just say that Calm would be a great place to explain this. Just be like, okay, guys, we're at Calm. Let's recollect our thoughts. What just happened? And then maybe Aerith might be able to say we were brought into the live stream, or maybe we were brought into the negative live stream, like Sephiroth's version of it or something. And maybe she can explain that, but she won't be able to explain anything else. So I don't know. Maybe
if we're taking what we just discussed, if we're taking that as like the accepted answer as to like why they were able to do the things they were able to do, that only further proves, because Cloud, like if I was thrown into a situation like that with no prior knowledge, and I wouldn't instinctually know that I could swat away buildings with a sword, or as Barrett, I wouldn't instinctually know that I can shoot my gun arm to like completely obliterate this skyscraper monster that's in front of me.
Right.
So that just leads me to further believe that if they instinctually knew that they had this Advent Children style powers, then that just leads me to believe that this is more of a sequel to Advent Children and the original Final Fantasy VII. Because if Aerith does know things, and then at the end of it now she doesn't know what's going on, then that leads me to believe that they destroyed Fate. Aerith knew everything that was going on up until this point where they destroyed Fate, and now she's like, now I don't know what's going to happen because we defeated Fate. So now it's anybody's game. So
I think the way that you just put that is exactly like, so, and it kind of plays into what you just said, Daniel, like a little bit ago too, is that there's a idea of like how Aerith sort of gets information in OG, and it's in the Sleeping Forest, where she's like, I just have this feeling that I need to get answers here. And she gets answers when she gets there, because the water altar, and this is through like Ultimanias, is a place where you have a direct connection to the planet. So like it's where like your prayer will be heard the most. Like, so one person can go there, pray for something, and just immediately be heard by the planet. And in the like explanation here is that that's probably the same thing that's happening to Aerith in Remake, is that there's like an instinctual reaction to what she's being told. There's only like bits and pieces, sort of the way that Cloud also gets his information, is that, and the party in the singularity is that they're not getting the full picture of what's happening. They're seeing like flashes, images of like events that have taken place, but they don't understand like the full context of why that these things are happening. They do know that a giant meteor heading towards the Earth is a very bad thing and that they should stop that, but they don't understand the context in which this is happening. They only know that the future that they're trying to stop is like, that's what happens. So they need to challenge that. They just don't know why. So at the end, having that be like the way that we view all of the characters in that moment is that they're feeling this instinctually, is the better way to look at it, I think, going forward. And probably the easiest way to explain it in like a part 2 as well. It's just seeing it in that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think I see that there's people in the chat might have some questions for Sleepezi. We are going to open up to Final Fan questions segment soon. So please, if you have any questions for Sleepezi, we'll be there in just a few minutes.
I'm sorry if
so
I know I'm usually reading chat too, which I'm doing a terrible job of because I'm ranting.
I knew when I started this, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to focus on chat and talk at the same time. So we go with onto the next topic. It's pretty common knowledge now that AC, Advent Children, before Crisis, BC, Crisis Core, CC, Dirge of Servers, DC, and now we're at EC with Ever Crisis. Earlier this month, Square Enix trademarked it. So I would like to pitch my theory to you, Sleepezi.
Yeah.
You may laugh at it, or you may build off of it. So for me,
it's all personally, fair game at this point.
I feel like you may know a little bit more than I do. But so when we talked about earlier, you even said it, almost taking the words right out of my paragraph here, where Jenova is this ongoing crisis within the universe, and it repeats and keeps going on. The literal definition of ever is exceedingly, it keeps going, never ending, and stuff like that,
right?
Increasingly, constantly. So with the word ever, literally meaning that, for me, I believe that this game is going to be about Jenova, and I think that it would be insane to be able to play as a Cetra. And then after watching your videos, like, oh my God, what if you played as Minerva? But anyways, we go back to it. Like, what if you took place during the time of the calamity from the skies? I think that would be such an amazing event to experience within a game. Now, whether or not this really impacts the future of the franchise, like the games and stuff like that, I don't know. I mean, it might just be a cool little scenario to play through. But yeah, I feel like that would be really cool to have the Ever Crisis be Cetra, and then during the Cetra time of the calamity from the skies, dealing with Jenova, dealing with her infecting people with a virus, dealing with the Cetra's. I can't remember which came first, but I believe that the Cetra was starting to fall out at this time. Like, they were starting to settle down, losing their ability to talk to the planet. Is this right? Around that time when the calamity fell?
It's around that time that I think they started to, humans went into hiding when Jenova showed up, I think. And this is something that I constantly need to clear myself up on. But I think the idea is that Cetra just started to either go extinct after this event. So right now in the history, Jenova showing up, there are still Cetra around, and they're just different sections of them. So some of them are a North Pole or North Pole. I'm just going to say that because it's just way fucking easier for me to say it like that. So there's some there, and there's some around the planet. And we don't really know what causes them afterwards to go extinct, but we know that a Falna, as an example, is a pure-blooded Cetra. So
yeah,
they must have
still stuck around,
gone out not too recently, right? Something must have happened over time. So
now this is
maybe a loss of connection.
I have it come to my attention recently that the book that I have, this one, this is The Legend of Final Fantasy VII. It has come to my attention that some of this stuff is actually not, it might not actually be accurate, and it's, that could be bad. It could be falsifying information. But there is a section of Cetra in this book, whereas the the Cetra are actually, or humans are actually just Cetra that lost, Onward from Disney Pixar, you know what I mean? Like they just stopped using magic, and then they lost the ability to talk to the planet. That's what this book says. So if if that's during that time when you have these conflicted, the Cetra are divided, where they're, some of them just want to settle down and start using technology, and rather than cultivating the planet, and then all of a sudden they're at their weakest, and all of a sudden, boom, Jenova falling from the sky, and experiencing that timeline, I feel like would be really cool. And I feel like Ever Crisis just kind of refers to that. This is the beginning. It was referred to as the original Crisis, I believe, in the original Final Fantasy VII. It was called the original Crisis.
And there are marks of that. Ever Crisis, quote unquote. I totally, so it's funny because I see that almost as like in the complete opposite way. Now, what you're describing sounds literally awesome. Like like in my brain, when I was rewatching like OG footage, I was like, when Falna starts to describe the events, all I want to see is Jenova like fucking up summons and getting like imprisoned and just having it be like a blockbuster moment of just like, let's see how that just went down. Like I want her to like have a flashback of retelling this event and just show us exactly how that went down, because it would be phenomenal. Playing a game of that would be literally the coolest thing ever. Okay, so this is where it's funny, because this is kind of always sort of the conversations are sort of spilling into each other pretty well here. But I think Ever Crisis, and people are going to be really mad at me for saying this, I think. God, it's about Genesis, but I'm saying it so under my breath. So here's the thing is that one of the things that is, and I'm not saying that this is what I think Ever Crisis is going to be just one for one about, but it was something I was actually looking at like right before jumping onto this, is that the developers said, for those who aren't cleared up on Genesis lore, I feel like I'm sort of trolling right now, but I'm trying not to make it sound like that. I actually am serious. There is a section of I think Crisis Core's like manual that sort of describes the end events of Genesis's role in that game, and also sort of explains why he then shows up in Dirge of Cerberus at the secret cutscene. Is that there's this idea of that Minerva, the will of the life stream, is sort of taking note that Genesis is a soldier who wants to defy fate, his fate, or wants to serve, like to live. He wants to find a way to stop himself from dying, and he is like finding whichever way he can to like survive this thing. And the live stream sort of grants him a recovery from his degradation, and then he gets taken away by who we later find out to be Vice and Nero, to deep ground, where there's a lot of very complicated lore and a lot of like not contradictions, but a mess of lore to like look through when it comes to that. The point that I'm trying to bring up is that the reason why she does that, or the live stream does this to Genesis, is because Genesis, and it's noted by the developers, is that he is awaiting to be summoned from for a future crisis. So when we look at Ever Crisis,
that would be FC,
and as we all know, the A, B, well, Final. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, that's the third game. Then that's the third game. That's what's coming later. Is so the term Ever is the root word ever is based in Eber, which is rooted in the book of Genesis. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that the future crisis, a game that is being announced to be like a direct association to the compilation in the title Crisis, and the developers alluding to maybe the fact of Genesis showing up for a future crisis, then there might be, and just the name Ever being a successor to Dirge of Cerberus's sort of lineage of naming, might suggest a future after Dirge of Cerberus, or something that takes place after
like
that.
I'm sorry, not Genova. Genesis' way of trying to get back to where Sephiroth is. That, like, like, wait a second, he comes back and he realizes everybody's gone. Like,
now I know that what I just said. Yeah, back in time. Let's get the DeLorean and let's head back through this thing. Obviously 88 miles per hour. That's as fast as the wind goes. That's lore. But the point that I'm trying to bring up is, and you know what? It's really weird to think this, because I know that a lot of people had like fan theories before like I ever made my videos. When I started making my videos, the thought in my head was like, they need to remake this compilation to some degree. And when we started hearing about Ever Crisis, I was like, and First Soldier, I was like, this is exactly what this is trying to do. This is like a retelling or an expansion of what we already know. So for me, I think, and also Ever Crisis and First Soldier are like debatable names. Like First Soldier, like that doesn't necessarily mean like Sephiroth either, which I didn't find out until later. But I know that would be massively disappointing for people to see like Genesis show up in Ever Crisis and be like, why is this happening? Like, why are you ruining this franchise further? I can see it on both of your arc. Yeah, exactly. Not Sephiroth's redemption arc.
I have my thoughts on Genesis. I do want to. I'll touch on First Soldier first, and then we can talk about Genesis. The number one voted thing that people wanted to hear us talk about was Genesis, but on Twitter. So when it comes to First Soldier, I do kind of agree with Mo on this one. He posted something where he was like, "Look, this is he thinks it's going to be a anime." And I really agree with him. I lean into that a lot. Whereas naming convention is obviously very important here in the compilation. So, Last Order, First Soldier. You got that naming convention kind of going on, and I think that they must share some kind of chemistry, some kind of similarity between the two names. And I think that's the media. It's going to be a movie. It's going to be an anime or something along that lines. And I believe that, I learned this too, that Sephiroth is not technically the first soldier. I believe that the soldier was deployed before Sephiroth and stuff like that, but Sephiroth is the first to be, he is like the first soldier. If you want to,
he's the first of his kind for sure. Yeah, and exactly. I think most people jump to that thought because it's like, well, also just Sephiroth is the most iconic. So it's like when you think of a soldier, like it's Cloud, it's it's Sephiroth after that. So and maybe Zack in that, but
he was the first.
But being the first of that.
Yeah, he was the first to have the Genova cells, right? Am I correct on that one? Like he's the first.
It all leads back to Genesis. It's debatable. I think it is Sephiroth first because Genesis and Angeal came after Sephiroth. He was the first like true like experiment. So like Genesis seems more like an afterthought.
I really think that they're going to make this about Sephiroth. Like I don't think they would make a movie or a game if it is a game. I still think it's a movie or an anime. It's not going to be like, hey, First Soldier, and you're going to be Joe. Like, like that.
Joe Detective.
Yeah. Right. Like, who's this? Wait, that's what? Right. So I think it's going to be about Sephiroth. And I do believe it would probably, like you said earlier, you would love to get into the mindset of, of Sephiroth during this chaotic time. And I think this would be a great way of like, looking at it. Of course, you can read Mo's book, The Nibelheim Incident, and that's a really good book. And they should probably just take the script there. Yeah, absolutely. Just take the script right from Mo. Be a prequel to the Nibelheim Incident. Oh, yeah. So I think that's what we'll see. I think we'll see a young Sephiroth, maybe like growing up thinking he's a soldier, he's awesome, and then eventually you get to feel that arc. But then as I think about this, I get nervous again. I'm like, okay, well, is this like prequel Star Wars prequel stuff? Like you want me to see what Anakin was before he was, like, okay, cool. Is this a redemption arc? You know what I mean? Is this what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so, look, and that's Sephiroth the weird thing good. Is that you need to like, I think the idea of these things, and again, why I also am with you on this is that I don't think it's room for us to be like, oh my gosh, he needs to be redeemed. Like it's more like here's like the fall from grace from being like the best to literally just the worst possible person ever. And it's like, let's see what that is. Let's see what he's going through. There's a lot, like there's still heavy debate that I get into about like whether Sephiroth and Genova are like one person. I personally believe that there's some other thing. I think it's Sephiroth mostly. People want to say it's Genova controlling Sephiroth or Sephiroth controlling Genova. I usually default to Sephiroth. But the idea is that you could see it as Sephiroth being like taken over by Genova's will, which is what leads to like him freeing his mother, him getting tossed into into the life stream in Nibelheim. All of these things could be equated to that, but like a setting up of like him going mad and like losing his mind, I think is going to be, regardless of whether or not I connect with him or not, kind of amazing to see in any form that it comes in. I would personally love it. Yeah, I did say jump. I saw that. I'm sorry, Schroeder. Jumps into the live stream. The compilation has run deep. It's too deep now to remove. I was just having that conversation, which is why I said that. I think the idea though would be just to like experience this thing, whether that's a game or not. I would really like it to be a game. I want it to be like Revengeance, like Metal Gear Revengeance. Like I would totally love that. Just make us feel like such a powerful dude, you know. Like if you made a game, you would have to make us literally the strongest and coolest thing ever. Yeah. So if they could express
Devil May Cry with Sephiroth, awesome.
Basically.
Yes,
as far as that goes, I mean, when you said anime, I instantly thought of like a series anime, and I wouldn't mind actually, because a series just allows you to go deeper into everything. I wouldn't mind actually a Final Fantasy VII anime series, because like Star Wars does it pretty well with was it Clone Wars or whatever.
Clone Wars, Mandalorian even does like a pretty good job of like expanding on like an idea or something.
Clone Wars goes between like so many, like it starts before certain movies, comes after certain movies.
Oh yeah,
you know, at the same time. So like a Final Fantasy series wouldn't be unheard of, to where it's like, you know, the series goes into things and then there's games that come out, but like the series ties along with, you know, movies or series or games or books even that come out. Everything can tie together, but I feel like if it were to be an anime, it would probably help the compilation be understood more if it was an actual series where they can divulge information and flesh it out a lot better than putting it in a 2.5 hour movie where you know you have a time crunch. A series allows you to have no time crunch, essentially.
With that like idea, who's to say it has to be about like why can't it just be about creating the first soldier, like the trials, the errors, the you know, like being able to finally succeed with Sephiroth, right? And then maybe we can go from there and like explore Sephiroth, like he becomes the first, you know, successful soldier that they're trying to create, and then you go on from there, and then
essentially, well, yeah, because you can have like a Shinra origin story with that series, a Hojo origin story with that series, which would lead into a Sephiroth origin story with that series. Like, you know, you have so many people that you could flesh out.
Of content.
Yeah, I know. You have Lucretia. Yeah, right. And we'd have so much more to talk about on the show.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. Cool. I would have more to talk about for sure. Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Yes. BC would be a great show just in general. Like a Turks show, I thought would be like so amazing, just because there's so much. I think that's actually one of the better content that compilation has put out, is like in a game that we literally can't play.
That's the thing. Yeah, exactly. Nobody's you know, who's played it. Oh man, that would be a cool one.
Only people who had mobile phones in Japan. It would be awful. Yeah, it would be nice to have that game. I completely agree with you on expanding on the lore of anything, you know, like, and just like for clarification too, like there's a lot that we do kind of like know about like certain timings of things, but like we like ironically don't even know like exactly when Sephiroth was born. Like that's something that we just don't know. Like we know that like the time frame he was, but we don't have his actual like birthday and stuff like that. So like having a series that discusses like when this takes place, like any information in the compilation that can be brought up, because Ultimania, the recent like remake Ultimanias didn't bring that up. So like Ever Crisis, First Soldier have just, no matter what they're covering, are just these huge gold mines for people like ourselves who are like talking about Final Fantasy VII, or people who are invested in like the compilation. Like these are things that we've been waiting to like get some sort of clarification on, or just assume that we never were going to get clarification on since the beginning. So no matter what First Soldier is, whether movie, whatever, or same with Ever Crisis, whether that's part 2 or some other extended part of the compilation universe or just a remake of it, like it will just be very satisfying. Like I'm already like, I was just wishing for any compilation stuff, period. So the fact that there's something else other than this main story coming out is like the biggest thrill of my life. Like this is more than I could have ever asked for being a fan of the lore of all of this. So
yeah, it's really exciting. Like as I said, I mean, anything compilation stuff, that's really exciting. It's the remake stuff that really gets you concerned. But I do think that part 2, if I want to like just throw out my idea there before we move on to fan questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Or I think we have one more. We have to talk about Genesis. But before we move on there, I will throw out that I do think that the next part will be called Reunion. That's just me. I think they're going to stick to words that start with RE. That's just me. I think you got remake and then maybe reunion, and I've said on the show Requiem, because like that has that's a word that has a lot to do with coming rejoining and stuff.
There's replicate too.
So there's things.
Oh my
like
god,
that.
They had the same thought. Regenesis, yeah.
Regenesis.
Totally fine with that.
There you go.
Fantastic.
And that is a perfect.
Those two are
segue.
on the same page.
Perfect segue into the Genesis topic. All right. All right. So here's where this is at, man. Because like before we got into this conversation, I said, okay, we're going to talk about Genesis. I need to collect my thoughts on Genesis because I just had this ongoing hatred for Genesis. And I think it's just developed into this thing where I don't know why I hate them anymore. I just don't like them. And then I think about it and I said, okay, I think it boils down to this. Is Genesis more important? Is he going to have a more important role than Sephiroth or Cloud or even Genova? And I think that's what hits me first. The first thing that hits me is I'm just like, I don't like the thought of his return, which shall not be forestalled apparently. And I do not like it because I'm like, is he going to come back as this, greater purpose? Like, does he have a greater purpose than Cloud or Sephiroth? Is he going to be the one that like stops Sephiroth? Is he going to be the one that, does these grand things? And like, it's just like, he feels like an afterthought to me. You know what I mean? Like he feels like, I know he was
absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. That's where I'm at with it. Whereas when in Crisis Core, when he was introduced in Crisis Core, I was like, this guy, I mean, he wasn't, who's this guy? Who's this guy? So I didn't like the fact that
who's this guy showing up?
Yeah, who's this guy on par with Sephiroth? Like, why is he sitting here? What is this guy? So that's where it was hitting me. You know what I mean? I don't like the idea of this uncertain. He's fogged with uncertainty right now. Like, what is his purpose? And the way from watching your videos, I'm like, he seems like he's being set up for this really, really good purpose. Like he's like by Minerva herself.
I couldn't say, by the way, like it took me at least like 4 different episodes to be able to say like Elfalna correctly. Like now it's just beating in my head. I used to say Elfalna and I'm like, I think it was Baby Seal who was like, just don't say it like that. Same with Minerva. It was like, these fucking words. I can't like figure this out fast enough. I understood. Yeah. I think when it comes down to Genesis, I can't. Okay, so so I'm on the same page with you guys with where I started. Is that the only thing that kept coming up for me? This is why the first video I made was like, like the games, the aspects of each part of the compilation that people hate, which is like people hate Dirge of Cerberus. People really don't like Loveless. They really don't like Genesis. Like he is literally like, if anybody looks at the compilation, that's like on the bottom of the list. That's if we're doing comparisons here, like a Jar Jar Binks of like the series of like people not enjoying this character at all. So from the thing that comes back to me is again, when I started looking at all this information, I was like, okay, so like without feeling any sort of one way or another about this, like what am I seeing here? and it starts with Remake. So I'm just going to kind of walk through all of these things, and I'm just going to let you have an opinion about it, whether you feel it will be there or not, you know, whether or not you think he might be involved. So the first thing is that we show up in Remake in Deep Ground, which is alluded to after Platefall, which is the area where you fight those creatures that are like have those talons coming out of their backs, right? So the developers have noted that that's a Deep Ground reference, which is from Dirge of Cerberus, which is also something where Genesis has like a large part of the history and how it turns out the way that it does in Dirge of Cerberus. Like Nero and Vice, who are the villains of Dirge of Cerberus, are like his quote unquote brother. They're not physically like related, but they associate with themselves that way. So he has a very integral part of that story. So that's not a direct connection right off the bat, but we're just going to keep going a little further, right? Yeah. So the talons on the backs of these creatures are in the same place as where Genesis's wings are. So Genesis's wing is on that shoulder. And the color association is red. So that was for me when I was convinced. I was like, okay, that is a direct connection to Genesis, which is sort of weird because again, I haven't like, and it has the same amount of joints in the wing as Genesis's wings do. So it's literally like a 1-for-1. So I'm just like, okay, that seems pretty clear, but that's no indication that he's in the game. So you didn't get to this part because you didn't watch part 4, but there's a Cetra proverb in the game, in Remake, where they talk about the providence of the planet and going to paradise. That is actually, so in the Japanese version of Crisis Core, Genesis gives this speech before absorbing this materia that turns him into this giant final boss, right? How he is receiving the providence of the planet and that he's going to take everybody to paradise, essentially, which is the destined place. So the idea here is that the Cetra proverb in Remake is making a direct connection to Genesis's speech before becoming the weapon, quote unquote, which is another thing I discussed, of the planet. So there are a lot of these, and then the obvious one being, let's say, the G and S type cells, which is also confirmation that those exist in the universe still from Hojo. So with all of that being said, it seems like there's this really roundabout way that Remake for me is sort of alluding to Genesis's like presence, not necessarily being deliberate about it. And I also want to state that I'm not necessarily like thinking that he would show up 1-for-1 Genesis. I think the role of Genesis is super important. I think people hate him because he's quoting a poem all the time, and that the role that he's trying to fill is, you know, it's not received well because the storytelling is not like representing a character properly. And if you took out 90% of the Loveless talk and then inserted the like actual character, which I think you could provide for him, that would make him infinitely more interesting for people. I think people would be a little off-put right off the bat, but I think that people could actually grow to be engaged by that character. And now the other thing I will say is that the goddess and the association with Loveless and all this other stuff, unfortunately for people who hate that stuff, is a direct comparison to like the events going into Crisis Core. So the last video that I do touches on it very briefly, but I go into it in the Structure of 5 series, is how intricately connected the things that are happening as like thematic story elements of Loveless show up in Remake all over the place, and thematic storytelling of like Crisis Core. But those themes are very specifically communicated, like Destiny, for instance, is very clearly communicated through Genesis's character. So the conversation of wings being brought up, the illusions of Deep Ground, his sort of mentioning in the character models for Deep Ground soldiers, which are the Talon creatures, and then just most of those things and also the future Crisis mention and the thing that I mentioned when we started talking about him before makes it very like it's on the, if it happens And I usually call these things and I'm like, if this happens, like I'll like $100 says that this happens. Like I am pretty certain, like I'm like 90% certain that he's going to be showing up in some form or fashion. So I don't know how that's going to be received though, because I'm looking at it like people who hate him are going to be so mad. There's a part of me that's like, well, how much of that is actually going to be something that the audience wants? Is this something like, this is always something I think about with the compilation, is that you're like, I'm kind of getting excited about this. I'm like, well, if Genesis shows up, like, are like even people who are kind of open to the idea, like how open are people going to be about something so controversial already? You know what I mean?
That would be a big change.
So
right, yeah, you're talking drastic change at this point. You know what I mean? Like for people who love the original story, which I've already said at this point, I don't believe a word. Like Katase came out already and said that you just assume that it's going to continue the way it has. It's not. Let's be honest. like there's going to be something that's going to happen.
There's going to be different elements to me, for sure. Like, I think it's a combination of both. Sorry to cut you off. I think that there's definitely like a balance to be struck between the old and the new. And I think some jarring, like it doesn't even have to be like Genesis, but I think there has to be a character that represents the same role of Genesis in Remake to some degree. And I'm not saying that for the sake of like just the OG and keeping OG the way that it is. It's a perfect example for the conversation that we're going into. So sort of how I bring him up at the end of the video, which I know you've watched with like Aerith, is in combination of that is that he's a perfect reflection of why I see Aerith's arc going the way that it does. So to make that clearer with the presence of him is a very good frame of reference for the audience to take. And I would like to now make a connection between, and people are going to hate me for doing this too, is that at the end of Avengers, people saw Thanos and people were like, who the fuck is this dude? Nobody knew who the fuck this dude was unless you were a comic book fan. And no one was at the beginning. No one was a fucking comic book fan unless you were a comic book fan. If you'd watched movies, there might have been some overlap, but it's not as big as it was, right? That was when things were taking off. It's the same thing that's happening in Remake, is that there are things being mentioned that only like compilation fans would see. There's a fucking horn. So I talk about this too in one of the videos. You know that behemoth that you fight on the side quest where you're gathering like materials in Remake? Yeah. The horns on that boss are an allusion to a villain in Dirge of Cerberus, because there's a villain in Dirge of Cerberus that transforms into a behemoth, and they literally one for one have the same horn. One for one. There's not a single behemoth in the entire story of Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy that have the same thing. So the point is that like things like that, something so small, so not particular, is being like scrutinized and explained to the audience that it's like, we're paying attention to this stuff. Like these are things we're thinking about while making this game. So to think that such an integral bigger piece won't be included is very difficult for me to believe at this point.
I'm 100% on board.
Again,
with
a rant.
No, you're okay. This is why we brought you on the show. I want to hear you talk. I love it. Wow. Yeah, man. You know, we've already gone a while. I don't know how long you have, but I'll talk all night. We're good to go.
All right, we'll do it.
Yeah. So
Twitch doesn't have a timer, dude.
It doesn't. We're good. I got the premium version of Zoom. We're fine, man. No time limit here. But anyways, when it comes to when it comes to Genesis, right? Being in Remake, you asked me before you went on with what you said. Yeah, I agree 100%. I think Genesis is going to be in Remake. I don't think there's any way around it, especially after watching your videos and these breakdowns. And actually, Maverick said earlier, and I really liked what he said. It got me thinking. Maverick said that what was it? I'm sorry. It was Cloud and Aerith. So each of these like godlike beings have their own champion. You know what I mean? You have Aerith, which is kind of on par with Minerva, or going to be on par. That's her champion, is Cloud. and then Minerva has her champion Genesis, and Genova has her champion Sephiroth, right, or something like that.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, it's I just saw that. I saw Maverick post that, and I was like, man, it's a really cool. I mean, it goes off of what you said. There's always 3 archetypes, right? So if you have the Genova and Sephiroth, I believe that would be, what would you say that would that's not the slave, that would be Genesis and Minerva.
Genesis and Minerva. So that's the funny thing is that Genesis definitely plays more into like the idea of the slave. So the thing is that the archetype introduced in Crisis Core is that there's this role that Genesis covets, which is the role of the hero. He's like, the world needs a new hero, and like he gets super on about that, and that's like the driving force of his character is that he sees Sephiroth filling this archetype that he loves from this book, Loveless, which has the archetype of the hero, the traveler, and the slave. And when he wants the title for himself. So the idea is that he is jealous of Sephiroth, wants to take that title for his own. And then sort of as an evolution of that topic, he's like, okay, well, I want to, have this honor that Soldier has, this like thing that is a hero quality. And so he starts looking for that and also a cure for his illness at the time. And the idea is that he won't ever become that actual role of the hero. It's what he wants, but ultimately that's not the role that he services. And then he quotes like a part of Loveless, which sort of indicates that he has some conscious knowledge after being in touch with the life stream, after absorbing this giant materia, that he kind of becomes aware that like he's in a fixed role. And even though he wanted to become this thing, it's not really in the cards for him to do. But then Minerva shows up and he's like, okay, well, you want to fill a role in this to some degree. So I'm going to like kind of put you away for like a little bit or send you back because I'm going to use you later. So it is interesting. So, but that the thing about Minerva's role as like a slave as well would be something new to me, like into something to think about. But it's more of like an evolution of the receiving of the role. So like for Cloud, it's really easy to see because he's the successor of Zack, and then Zack is the successor of Angeal, and it's like the passing down of this hero sort of title, quote unquote, even though I guess you would say that Angeal is the traveler at that point and then passing on. I guess Zack sort of becomes sort of a wild card because he's also taking on the roles of several at the end of the game of Crisis Core as well, where he's noted as being Angeal and Sephiroth represented at the final part of the game. So I think it gets very difficult to like maybe see it as like everyone's like a 1-for-1, like slave is then passed down as a slave is passed down as a slave. So I guess you could say that Minerva would fill the role of a traveler, as Angeal is also associated with the Cetra, which is also something that's sort of associated with like Aerith, maybe. Sorry, I know that like I'm breaking this down in my head and I'm literally not making
thinking out loud, like bring it. So, like I love what Maverick brought up there. The the 2v2v2. I think that's interesting. I mean, you could say in a way that Minerva would be the slave because she's kind of the slave to the live stream, right? Or the planet where she's
she's literally just like a talking piece for it. Yeah. So like she's just there to. She's not making the call. Yeah, exactly. She's making the call based off of what the live stream is communicating to her. So maybe that is a proper way to see that. And I love that question. I have to look into that.
It's a really cool, like, I mean, it's cool to think of it. I just don't like the idea of like Genesis being on par. But I mean, when you get if he's on par, I feel like it's okay. But as long as he doesn't exceed the importance of like Sephiroth as whether he's going to be this villain or a hero, I'm not sure, but like as long as he doesn't exceed Cloud or Sephiroth or Genova for that matter, like those are the villains of Final Fantasy VII to me. And I just don't like the idea of Genesis coming in here and being this more important,
I don't think he will ever be as important as Sephiroth or Cloud. I think for sure, like as you're sort of, I think again, going back to like the detail oriented like character stuff, I think whoever's making this game Square probably, that they have a very conscious opinion of the opinions of like their audience.
Yeah.
I think they know they're very aware, and especially in Remake, of like what things people don't want touched, what they don't want changed, where like the right chords to hit with like Aerith are. It's like, let me allude to this. Like they're playing heartstrings there. But they only are doing that because they know how aware they are of you being aware of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when you brought up
Genesis isn't a heartstring ball.
This isn't that harp.
Nobody wants the harp to be played for Genesis. I think he will mainly be a character that serves the role of explaining the conversation. He will probably be used more as like a conversation starter than an actual character. He might not even show up with like Genesis's voice. Like, I didn't bring this up, but like Roach is also like a pretty good potential character to bring this conversation into, because he's a new character. We don't know exactly how he's been experimented on, if at all, but he seems to have some extraordinary abilities for just a regular soldier. Like he is literally like making a bike fly.
Yeah. I liked Roach. I thought that was a really cool addition. I just don't. Obviously, I think he feels more of like a bridge. Like we're a bridge to gap different aspects of the game. You know what I mean? Just kind of here we're gonna use Roach as a story, a plot device. You know what I mean? Like let's keep it going. And I love the idea that there's other soldiers. Obviously, Shinra would have more soldiers. And I like that idea. I don't think he'll ever rise above. I don't feel threatened by Roach, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel threatened by Genesis, and that's where it kind of comes down to. And the way that it was in your videos, it just like I foresee Sephiroth just kind of like having this redemption moment. And you say it's said in the book as well on the way to Smile that you'll never get rid of Sephiroth unless as long as Cloud remembers him, right? And it just feels like the only resolution to that is, I guess, Cloud dying or Sephiroth redeeming himself, like just saying, okay, I don't need this, I don't need to do this anymore. Like that's only, I'm trying to figure out where the redemption, or not the redemption, the resolution of it is. And that's where I go, and I'm like, well, it seems like Genesis was kind of written into this game to kind of be this, well, if there's no Sephiroth, there's got to be a villain, you know what I mean? And I guess it's Genova, but Sephiroth, I feel like is more powerful than Genova at this point. I don't know.
I feel they're one and the same.
Yeah, that's where I get conflicted, is that it just feels like the resolution, as long as Cloud is remembering Sephiroth or holding on to that hatred, then Sephiroth can do his thing. But it just feels like the only resolution to this is if Sephiroth, because you can't kill him, so he has to be redeemed or something. You know what I mean? Or
I think. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
No. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm trying to get your idea on it. Yeah.
I think that there's for sure. So, okay, like looking at it like from this perspective of like the importance of sides, is that one of the reasons why I'm so like, and this is just purely like my opinion about this, but the reason why I enjoy the idea of like the live stream being associated with maybe like this same sort of structure that Shinra has set up is that it's not working in the benefit of anybody. It's working for its own preservation. Shinra understands that the function that he serves is for the preservation of himself, but he also understands why people rely on it. And he even calls Barrett out on it, saying it's like, look, you want to tear this all down, but you don't actually have an answer to any of this. So like, if you think I'm such a bad guy, are you going to just take control after all of this is over? And the thing about Barrett is that he doesn't. That's not ultimately what happens in the story. Is he ultimately goes off looking for oil as like this other like resource, but like the people who take over Edge, like it was built like kind of in part with like Rufus's sort of like meddling and stuff like that. So like the power structure doesn't really shift as much as people think it does after these events go down. So Shinra dies, then Edge is built, but like nothing really changes. Like, and he's not really that kind of person at that point, Barrett. So the idea being is that there is this idea of like, if you're going to take it all down, what is the answer to that question? Like, are you going to have a system in place afterwards that actually like helps people? Which is why before, like at the beginning of this conversation, I found it really interesting that Barrett was also using this concept of hate with Tifa is that he's not real, like he isn't really a good leader per se. Like he's taking on all of these people's responsibilities and all of these struggles, and he's doing a really good job of doing that, but he isn't really the kind of person that's dealt with his own stuff yet. Like he still has to go through all the stuff with Dyne and stuff like that and like figure that stuff out for himself. So in like sort of the grander scheme here is that the live stream has the same setup. So the question that kind of gets brought up with like Sephiroth is that there's this system of defying destiny, and I want to be in control of that. Now that's not a necessarily inherently a bad thing. What he wants with it is bad, is he wants to literally become like the reality itself. Like he wants everything to be in his image, his perspective, everything. Like he wants everything to absorb everything and just have it be Sephiroth. Whereas the planet is going at it from its own selfish desires as well, is that it's looking out just for its best interest. So you have this Genovan Sephiroth selfish desire to control things. And then you have the planet's Minerva and Genesis set up to be that sort of representation of an antagonistic role, not necessarily the antagonist, but the representation of that structure. So you have the Sephiroth Genova structure, you have the Minerva and Genesis structure, and then you have the people who are fighting for the in-between, which is the party, which is that they're the whole point. Okay, this actually perfectly summarizes my point. Is the reason why the ending for Remake is so good is that it's only establishing the characters' wants for their desire to change things. Their desire to change things is so great that they will risk everything to do so. And that's what we need to know about the characters. So going forward, if anything like that ever comes up again, they're going to want to change it. So that's been very well established. So that perfectly establishes them as the middle person, the people wanting to see both of these sides and confront them if they need to. And as far as Roach is concerned, I only brought him up as like sort of like if you didn't want Genesis as that role, but he might better suit the idea of cell degradation that like President Shinra brings up, is that he would be a really good way to express that, like through the story he's chasing you or something like that, and like each time you see like him like not himself anymore, like see somebody who's so exuberant and like full of life like lose like that sort of, that would be like the way to do that. I just thought of that and I want to see it, Square. I swear to God.
What is this? You're like yelling at Square in the back.
Square, what is it?
I've said it before.
He's in the office next to me.
I've said it before, and honestly, like what I want to see the most, like I don't care if they like, I mean I care, but if they give me this, I wouldn't care if they changed everything. Like they can make every character, they could change every character to like Gary Busey and I would still play the game. But like if they flesh out Red 13's story in Cosmo Canyon, I want to see more of Seto and Red 13's mother in that instance where they had to protect Cosmo Canyon, because I feel like that is such an important part of the game that just got talked about once and then that was that. But I feel like, you know, just like a backstory between like Seto and Red 13's mother and like his battle with the Gi or GI or whatever tribe in that one part, like I feel like that could be such a, like, even if it's just DLC, I'll pay $60 for it. I want to see that one part of the whole story, out of everything in the whole story, just that one part fleshed out, because that's what playing back in like in the year 2000 when I played Final Fantasy VII, like that's the one part, like besides Aerith's death, that was the one part that really got me. I was like, you know, like the statue of his father cried. I was like, oh my god, that statue's crying.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was insane. I was like, oh shit,
God,
he's still there. He's just sitting there. It's super. Yeah, literally.
He's existing
Thank
in
God
non-existence.
his son showed up.
Right.
Right. Literally the worst place to be ever.
So many moments in Final Fantasy VII like that. And then you have to think of like dying. You know, what a moment that's gonna be.
Yep.
God.
And I hope they don't pass over these parts. I hope they actually go into them. I hope they're not just like, what can we take out? Oh, we could take out Seto. We could take out Don because it's not, super important. No, I hope they flesh these out.
So awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, okay. So as a way of like kind of meeting here on that subject is one of the reasons why I'm also adamant about this. Is I go into it mainly with like Aerith's death in my most recent video. But the idea of that video is sort of to highlight like none of the characters have sort of become who they need to be in order for Final Fantasy VII to end the way that it does. So like Cloud loses to Sephiroth specifically as an example because he's not Cloud yet. He's not even close to being like who he is at the end of the game, which is why Sephiroth's just like, okay, like I'm just going to disarm you because you might be powerful enough, quote unquote, but you're not like the internal like journey hasn't happened yet. So that's there to say like none of these characters on their own can kind of stand on their own 2 feet about any of this. So, and that's where this idea of like power of friendship, and I hate that, and it's the reason why I use it so much in my video. Kingdom Hearts, right? Power of friendship, or like Avengers, like Assemble, like it's so like this idea that these people together can kind of hide behind this group and like move forward and thinking that they don't have to confront anything was such a fascinating idea to me. It's like, this isn't actually making them stronger. Barrett telling Tifa that she needs to hold on to hate isn't making her individually stronger. It's just pushing her forward, but not actually resolving anything. So there's all of these like character moments where these characters aren't there yet. So the thing that works so well about the structure of Remake in regards to like moments with Seto and like Nanaki is that these all play into these characters, and this is the entire structure of Final Fantasy VII is separate stories, individual arcs, individual characters coming into their own in order to actually tell the story of a group of heroes, right? Who actually accomplish something. We get to know these people. We get to see how they grow and come together. Like them fighting a harbinger at the end of the game doesn't say anything in terms of volumes of how these characters go through what they do. So to defeat that purpose doesn't make any sense.
Well said, man.
Yeah, so it's
absolutely.
That's sort of, so we have to see that. We have to see Nanaki. We have to see Denzel. Like we have to see these, not Denzel, I'm sorry. I start sneaking in like, we have to see Genesis, like just all of like the stuff that you aren't signed up for. That'd be amazing. The idea of like saying Dine, it's like all of these things need to happen for our characters in order for any of this to hit properly. So, but under the context of looking at it through, how does this play into them actually coming into contact with what they ultimately want to do? So the ending might be different. The ending of Remake might be different, but the journey of these characters is always going to be just about character arcs. It's going to be about the character development. It needs to do that. And the thing that makes me feel so strongly about this is that Remake focuses so much on just the characters. Like for a majority of the game, their banter, like them speaking to one another, like these moments do not like communicate a lack of understanding of character. It means that they think that that's the most important element of the game. Otherwise we like, and let me just say, you owe me a pizza is probably like the dumbest line I've ever heard in any game, but it's still like, there are like slip up moments. I'm not trying to paint this as like the master of master classes of writing, but there is a definite understanding of character and to throw that all out the window after spending like the majority of the game focusing on that just seems so silly to me.
It's well said, man.
Sorry.
Well said.
Again.
No, that just reaffirms that, you know, you have to at least keep these moments, keep these pivotal moments in the next installments. So with that said, I'd like to take fan questions. Anybody in the chat have a question? Oh, wait, go ahead, Benny.
There was a question I saw somebody ask much earlier, but chat is moving too fast for me to remember who it was. Yeah,
thank you everyone for tuning in. This is really awesome first stream, and we have a good chat going on. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this first live stream. I hope you've enjoyed it so far.
So I saw somebody ask about what actually defines a living planet. And so when I read that question, the first thing I thought of was that the reason why that this Earth is called Gaia, right? In 7, the reason why I think Gaia is a living planet is because it's referred to as a living planet, and that humans are the disease or the infection. And when the Earth feels threatened, it releases weapons as if the weapons were its immune system. So that is why in the game, I feel like it is actually a living planet, something that defends itself, because when Sephiroth summons Meteor, it releases the weapons, and the weapons are actually meant to destroy everything that is a threat to the actual planet. And then when the threat is, because I believe also that this isn't the first time the weapons were ever summoned by the planet. I believe they were summoned when Jenova first came, which might have something to do with why the Cetra were all dying out.
They operate exactly how you describe it, which is that it's like an antibody like system, right? So like the antibodies don't necessarily have enough discernment to say what is the target of the infection. They will just target what they think is the enemy and then destroy it. So like that could be like your immune system for like all we know. So like, for instance, the party as an example, as like a comparison there, is that, and they were created, the weapons by the planet during the conflict of Jenova and the Cetra. But the Cetra or something happened for the Cetra to seal Jenova away, which actually made the planet go, okay, like we didn't need to use the weapons. We didn't bring them out yet, but we started making them. So instead of making them and putting them out, we'll actually just put them away for a little bit. So that's why you see them encased in ice in the northern crater, is that the planet is keeping them for use later. Which now in hindsight, thinking about that, they could have just gotten rid of the weapons thinking, oh, we don't need these and we'll just bring them back whenever. But they probably were like, we'll probably need these later. Like, let's just put these away for
Genova's still here.
So
the ever crisis.
It's interesting because this never really gets touched on, but Frozen Sephiroth and Ultima Weapon are actually in the same exact spot, because where they find Frozen Sephiroth, that's where you see Ultima Weapon's eyes open up inside of the ice. So I don't know what the connection is.
All in the same area.
Yep, they were all in the same area. That's where the live stream washed Sephiroth up, I believe. And so I don't know why they were all together in that way.
I might be mistaken on this. Yeah, go ahead, Sleepezi. You can probably explain it better. Probably even answer.
I was gonna. Go ahead. The idea is that just to start the conversation off, is that Sephiroth, after jumping into live stream, gets brought to that place, like specifically because he figures out that place is what he thinks to be the promised land, is the northern crater, which is also the same conclusion I think that Hojo comes to. So like, which is kind of important just because Sephiroth is like gaining the knowledge of the planet after falling into the live stream, and his deduction from everything that he knows is that this is the place that's important. I need to be here. So he goes there. I don't know why specifically. I think the weapons gather there because maybe Sephiroth is there. But the idea is that, the threat of the planet. And oddly enough, there's also a connection between Minerva being in the northern crater as well, which I don't know if that's clear at any of my videos, but the place where you fight her is in the northern crater area as a secret boss. And that cave also has Emerald Weapon in the background as well, which is pretty interesting too. Like Emerald Weapon is like encased in ice, but the ice is actually, I think, also materia. So like they're all imprisoned in just materia. So Sephiroth isn't a materia. Like it's all the same. Wait, didn't Hojo until the end denounce the existence of the Promised Land? It's just a deduction of where. So he makes that deduction based off of the fact that it's where like there's an abundance of Mako, which is sort of just like the scientific way of him deducing that like the Promised Land is just filled with Mako. I think that's how that goes. I could be wrong. I need to restudy a lot of things.
Hojo's description of the Promised Land is like similar to before scientists agreed upon gravity. It was just like magic type stuff. Like science was magic. Yeah. So to the Cetra, the Promised Land with all of its Mako energy was like a Promised Land with all of this wellspring of magic. And to scientists, it's like, okay, that magic is actually science. There is a Promised Land, but it's just like, you know, where you would find the most oil.
Well, Genova's being held up there in the northern crater. Like, so you have Sephiroth has the Genova cells in him, right? So when he falls into the live stream, wouldn't it just be Genova trying to get the reunion, pulling him towards her, and that's why he gets washed up next to her? Like,
so that's the weirdest thing is that so, and I have literally had to like track these events because there is this argument of Sephiroth Genova who's controlling what is that he takes the head to the Promised Land, but the reason why Sephiroth needs the head at all is because the head is the point of reunion. So Sephiroth can't control, it has no involvement with reunion. He has no control over making people go where. The meeting spot is always her head. So he keeps it and uses both a combination of the live stream and Genova to rebuild a body, which is why he's in that materia and why half of his body is missing, because he disappears once hitting the live stream and takes both of the head and him to the quote unquote Promised Land, which is the northern crater. That's the same way as AC, by the way, for anybody wondering, is that it's the piece of Genova's head that he's using Genova to activate reunion, and that just the same way that he does in OG is that his will is over Genova, which commands her to incite the events of reunion, which is why he also has control over Genova.
Real quick, I do want to give Vinny, I think Vinny referenced Split Heart, your question. I think that was the question. I do want to give credit there. And then when we go to the next question, I mean, we'll take more questions. This one seems to be kind of funny. This one's from Gene. Says, this is for Sleepezi. Please, hold on. Please tell us about the moment you met Jack Quaid. It would be great to know about your beautiful relationship with the son of Meg Ryan.
The son of Meg Ryan. I met him in my garage once, and that's it.
And that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
He showed up, and for anybody who doesn't know who that is, look him up. The lore is there. It's definitely Final Fantasy VII related, and I totally encourage people to look into amazing work in The Boys. Also a great series. Oh, yeah. So
yes. So
fantastic movie.
I don't know if you're not willing to share more, but he just walked into your garage. That's it.
He was friends with a friend, and he showed up. And I'm not famous at this point, or not a working actor at this point, and I just knew him through somebody else.
That's awesome.
That was it.
Really cool. Really cool. No, I love The Boys though. What a show.
The Boys is amazing. He's the main character. That's the guy. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's freaking awesome.
Fantastic dude.
I love that show. Does anybody
Super
have
good.
questions for Sleepezi? We're gonna take a few more questions, and then we're gonna if you still have time, Sleepezi, if you want to stick around, we'll do this mad theories game that we got going on. It's
I would love
like
to
Mad
participate
Libs.
in whatever you got going. Let's do it.
Okay,
You can do whatever
it's like
it is
Mad
that you
Libs,
want.
but with theories. It's
I'm down with that. I love theories and I love math. So
awesome. Does anybody have questions? Sleepezi, and we'll move on.
So, I guess while people are formulating their questions, I this isn't anything we have to like expand upon or whatever, but whenever I think of Jenova as like, you know, an invading alien species, one time I had a thought. I was like, what if she was like the runt of the litter and there's like she was just a scout and then there's just this invasion force of Genovas coming to the planet?
Oh jeez. The Reapers like, from Mass Effect? The Reapers are coming.
That'd
basically
be awful.
Oh my god.
That would be so awful for the planet. It's like, oh yeah, there are 20 more of these things out there and they're all heading to the thing. It's like
20 million more.
It's literally like the Reapers from Mass Effect.
Siblings. Yeah.
Part 2 ends with like a bunch of Genovas approaching the approaching Gaia, just like Mass Effect 2.
They all have eyeballs for nipples and everything.
Oh my god.
That's it. Which, by the way, just gone, totally removed. It's all gone from the remake, which is, you know, other than that, very faithful to the original design, which is pretty interesting. So, I definitely think that some Time Devourer stuff would be really weird. Sorry, I keep saying Time Devourer, but yeah, Lavos spawn, I guess, is what I was thinking of from Chrono Trigger. But just a bunch of babies, and you're just like, well, this is a really great situation to be in.
All right, here we go. We're gonna. It doesn't look like it looks like we're good to move on. We're gonna go to the Mad Theories segment of this show. Oh, actually, I do want to go back all the way to the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
When Sleepezi said, or I guess I referenced Sleepezi's video about the 8 pillars of Cetra and then the 8 reactors. Obviously, there's more than 8. You know what I mean? There's 9. But I think what Sleepezi was showing was the 8 pillars, like on the surface, like
the iconic ring of Midgar.
Yeah, you see the 8, and then like in the Cetra image, there's 8 pillars. Who knows? Maybe there's a secret 9th one below in the Cetra. We don't.
Well,
know.
in the capital, in the center of where Midgar is, technically in the Cetra, you know, I guess capital, you can say it just for lack of a better term. We zoom in, and there is just a giant pillar of live stream coming out of the middle. So it's a 1-for-1.
There you go. Okay.
Come at me with this 9. Don't talk to me about Reactor 0, Clark. I'm calling you out. I actually do have a question here. Actually, really quickly, I will answer it. Since nothing shall forestall my return is technically a promise. Oh God. Does that mean that the morrow cannot be barren of promises by definition? He's referencing Loveless. If so, does this create a bootstrap paradox? Is this where the whispers come from? You know what? Probably.
You know what? Sure.
No further explanation.
You know what? Yeah, sure.
With thinking like that, anything is possible.
Oh my God.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for
Baby Seal sent that in.
Baby Seal. If I would have had to guess.
Right, exactly.
All right, so we're gonna go on to the Mad Theory. So now this is going to be like Mad Libs, where I'm going to ask you for 1 or 2 words to give me, and they're going to be Final Fantasy VII related, or unless specified otherwise. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually fill in the blank here, and then I'm going to read this theory off to you, and you have to back it up. You have to confidently back it up. You have to say this obviously is true.
Okay,
here we go.
I can lie through my teeth.
Yep, you got it.
Oh wait, give me 1 second. I have to really quickly. 1 second, guys. Hold.
Absolutely, man. All right, so Vinny, what do you think of the conversation show so far, guys? And everybody in the chat, you guys digging this? Thank you so much for tuning in to the very first live stream. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so if you dropped a follow, I'm sorry, I'm in OBS. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm not on that level where I have like the cool little pop-ups and says, yeah, you leveled up or something. Not there yet. I'm not sure how to do it, but thank you so much. If you followed along to the Twitch channel, thank you. If you caught this episode in the midway through and you want to get the whole thing, it will be uploaded to YouTube. So that's youtube.com/FinalFanTV. So yeah, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic experience. I love hearing that. You're doing great. This is awesome. Thank you guys so much. That really means a lot. And this is really, I love it. I love the atmosphere of this. I love seeing the chat going on. You guys are talking amongst yourselves. It's really cool. And
chemistry is great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to keep doing this live stream, this live streaming thing every Saturday.
The only question I had for chat is because of the segment that I'll be doing. I haven't done a challenge run for every single Final Fantasy. There are some where I don't know exactly how to make a challenge run for them. I've done many for 7. I've done pretty much all of them for 10. It's 5, 6. I haven't done 8. I did the White Mage only Final Fantasy 1 run. If there are any challenge runs, no matter how easy or hard you guys would like to see in a segment, just let us know so I can see how to go about doing it.
Yeah, Vinny
hopefully they're not impossible.
I've given Vinny the name of Limit Breaker because he breaks the limits of Final Fantasy. That's right. Like you heard earlier in the show where he did a 1 mage run.
I would watch the hell out of any challenge. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Nice.
So the thing about a solo White Mage run in Final Fantasy 1 is it is extremely difficult and tedious and probably not the most fun thing to watch me do. Right. Because some of the boss battles are like some of the boss battles are like maybe 45 minutes to an hour long because
in the field.
Well, because it's like everything happens so fast. It's not on like a wait time battle. So sometimes I preemptively heal myself to make sure that I don't die because the White Mage, has very little attack power. So it's a lot of me like preemptively healing and then trying to like manipulate the game's code so that I can attack 36 times before the enemy gets to attack once. So
you got Ars Omnia. Oh my God, why can't I speak? I words professional here on the podcast. So Ars Omnia.
It happens.
I vaguely recall reading about several interesting challenge runs involving 12's Gambit system, but that was years ago. I don't remember the context of them now, so maybe we can look into that. And then, yep.
Okay, I could probably look into that and get the details for that. But Thank you, I've done Final Fantasy X. Yeah, that's a nice shirt. The Guy Fieri Sephiroth shirt.
Baby seal. There you go. That's for you.
That's right.
But for Final Fantasy X, I've done the no sphere grid, no summoning. I did that one. That was difficult. And then Final Fantasy VII, I call it the Soldier First Class. I don't think it actually has a name, but I did the Soldier First Class challenge where I got Cloud to level 99 before fighting the Scorpion tank boss. And that took about 700
No
hours.
way did you do that.
Yeah, it took about 700 hours.
You trained before the boss.
Yeah.
That's insane. Wait, that's like I didn't know. I only know of like 2 people who have tried to do that, and you're saying that you've literally grinded the first section of the game.
Yeah, but it took me an entire summer on my PlayStation 1. I didn't use I didn't. That was before the ×3 speed and all that stuff. It took me an entire summer, about 700 hours of just grinding.
I literally was debating to myself, like, I think not even a week ago, I was like, should I do that? I was like, no, I'm lore crazy, but I don't know if I could actually sit through that. You're champion. Oh my God.
Yeah. So
people should look into that thing, because that, just to see how much dedication that has to be, it's insane. It's insane. Yeah. You look it up right now. I don't know what it's called, but that's a mark. You're champion, sir. It's a 1% thing.
All right, Sleepezi. We need a character from Final Fantasy VII. From the original Final Fantasy VII. Bugenhagen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then a moment from the original Final Fantasy VII?
Midgar Zolom being impaled. I know that we're talking about that too.
Midgar Zolom being
overall.
impaled. All right.
right.
So your theory that you confidently know about, and this is going to be your next theory video, but we'll just go ahead and have it exclusive here on Final Fan TV. What if Bugenhagen is from the future and goes back in time to prevent the Midgar Zolom from being impaled?
He's from PETA.
So what if?
Yeah, what if?
What if? Okay, well, yeah, he's from PETA. So obviously the Bugenhagen is a studier of the study of planet life and has a very clear idea of the functions of the planet, destiny, and how those things could be prevented. But from what we know of the end of OG, he starts to change his mind a little bit about that. And then also in On the Way to a Smile seems to want that sort of journey for Nanaki as well. So, but he, as we know from On the Way to a Smile, dies and goes into the live stream. So maybe for people who are so subscribed to the Aerith dies and returns theory, maybe we should take a look at that Midgar Zolom scene again and see why that is obviously the most pivotal moment of the original part of the series, and why Bugenhagen used his power as an authority on the Cetra and the live stream to go back and prevent this key moment. Because look, like, if the Midgar Zolom doesn't get impaled, the party doesn't actually make it through. That's my interpretation of events, is that if the snake isn't killed, then how does the party continue forward? Can you answer me that question? How does the party get through?
Wow.
No.
I mean,
I hope. Wow. I hope that means
Bugenhagen. That means Bugenhagen stopped Sephiroth successfully, because Sephiroth wouldn't be able to do it.
Pretty much.
So he just went back in time and did it himself. Wow. He's literally the hero of the story. I'm okay with that. It's not Genesis. He is literally the most important part of the. Wow. I'm blown away. I love how you backed it up
for the hour-long lore video describing exactly how this goes down. This is a summary. The Zolom skip.
Zolom skip,
which is a meta moment.
Wow, I can see the thumbnail now. I see it. The text going diagonally down. The Zolom skip. All right, so we have
Bugenhagen and Zolom.
I need. That's a good one. I got an adjective.
Workable title.
An adjective. We got one more. We got another theory for you. An adjective for it. Just something that just describes something.
Oh, is it all just me?
Yeah.
Am I just filling it in?
I mean, you're the Lord Master here. You obviously.
What?
Yeah.
I wanted to hear your guys' theory. That's right, Lore Master.
I mean, I completely support your theory on that one. I mean, you backed it up with On the Way to the Smile book. I mean, you really supported the decision. I mean,
great.
Theory. It's well done.
Pretty.
Yeah. Take that, Maximilian, dude.
Maximilian, dude. Oh shit. He inspired the first video.
He
inspired the first one. He's in the credits for it.
Bugenhagen.
Yeah. The man. That guy. The real Bugenhagen. The real source of this lore. Travesty. Okay, so if I okay, so enchanting, does that work? Is that a word that I can use?
And then one more.
That's a word. Okay. Bitter.
Okay. Wow, this is actually. I mean, I love
it works out great.
This one. Now you love the color. You're obsessed with the colors yellow and purple. Now they contrast them. They contrast each other throughout the entire Final Fantasy VII franchise. Yellow being representative of enchanting, and purple being bitter. So, does that make sense?
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, yellow is enchanting and purple is bitter.
Yeah,
I mean, I believe it.
I mean, if you guys
matches up.
explains itself. Yeah, so definitely enchanting. I mean, Aerith, enchanting. And bitter, definitely Genova. Totally 1 for 1. The only connection that could be made to that. It's a taste. It's a taste thing.
Gene says enchanting is a remake of Enchanted. So
there you go.
They're
perfect.
All right,
you are doing a better job explaining this for me than I am making the argument.
I got another.
Look, split heart, you got it.
Yeah, actually, yellow would be better because lemons. So that's what
I guess
says.
Right.
Yeah.
Debunked completely. I'm so
really,
sorry.
Honestly,
guys.
that makes a lot of sense.
This is what this has all been
Enchanted.
Building up to. All of the videos.
You just had the theory mixed up, bro. Like you were on the right track. It's just the flip flop. Purple is enchanting. Yellow is
right.
Fair. Yeah,
that's right.
So I need a. We'll get this one from the chat. Let's let the chat do this one. It's going to be the first one. The first one that pops up. Final Fantasy X character. First one that pops up.
Oh, good. Final Fantasy X. I love that game.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
I love that
you
game.
said earlier in the show how knowledgeable you are of Final Fantasy X. So we got Riku. That Vinny's already getting excited. His
favorite character.
I can feel. I'm getting woo.
She's the only reason I can do challenge runs in that game.
And I need a Final Fantasy VII threat. I need a threat to Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
You
guys definitely have this on
Shrek.
Weapon. Stop in the weapons. Okay, here we go. It is said that Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy VII share a universe. But what people may not know is that Riku lived on through the greater life stream and then carried over to the world of Gaia in Final Fantasy VII, in which they will be reincarnated in part 2 to stop weapons. So Riku stopping weapons. Vinny, would you like to field this one? Because I mean, I know you love Riku.
Sure. I mean, Riku was, strong enough to destroy Penance in Final Fantasy X, and Penance was basically like a angelic super god created by the church in order to fight sin. So I believe that when Riku destroys Penance and sin, essentially Yu Yevon, when Riku destroys sin, Yu Yevon uses her as the shell armor, and then basically becomes a summon. And then when the weapons get summoned, because Penance was basically like a weapon as well. It was just a artificial man-made weapon to fight sin, which was a natural disaster. So when the weapons get summoned, it awakens Riku to have to, the connection, like the Holy Trinity between Penance and Yu Yevon and Riku coming together to fight the weapons, because at that point, the weapons are actually man's greatest threat for that moment, and Riku rises above the ashes like a phoenix and saves the party from the weapons.
God damn. Wow.
Part 2.
Wow.
I will say immediately, my first impression of what you just said is that, and I was thinking this the entire time, is like, this is what people like. This is how it sounds like to explain remake. It's like, I understood only so much of what you just said because I know nothing about 10. But I was like, he could be saying, and he is. He's making it up. Is that like this could all be truth to me? I'm like, I have no argument against what you just said because there's who is Riku? No idea.
Sleepezi not like, randomly yells at the Square Enix guy. He's making it up.
This is. Can somebody bring me like a spreadsheet or something for this character? Everyone's left the office. I don't know where anybody is. Nomura, you worked on this, right?
Maverick loved it. Split Heart says, I mean, obviously Riku destroys weapons. They are part machine. She's an Albed. Easy peasy. Easy peasy.
Oh, God. All right.
Yeah, I mean, come on, man.
Easy.
And
super
then,
easy.
And Split Heart continues. And then her and Yuffie will join to form a girl group.
Ninja girl group.
Which obviously doesn't happen, right? That doesn't happen.
Along.
Is that reflected in 10 at all? Girl group? Is that something?
No. There's nothing about 10 has anything to do with like girl power or like three girls getting together to sing concerts and wear dresses and changing their clothes.
That sounds like a really, really bad idea. It sounds like a bad idea. So I'm glad it's not in there.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. If you want to take one more, we can do one more. I like to have the chat in there. That was pretty fun. Let's give me a summon materia.
Ooh, this is the one I came up with.
Like this changes Mad Libs with chat. Like you can have chat provide the answers. That's pretty cool. It kind of takes the weight off the shoulders.
Knights of the Round was selected.
Knights of the Round.
Knights of the Round. Okay. Knights of the Round, and then I need a noun from chat. Noun.
A person noun. I this was my question. A person noun.
Yeah. Oh, person noun. I'm sorry. Yeah. You can read it too if you want.
Okay.
Okay. Stop. You expose Nomura for
Genesis.
Okay. Oh, okay. Genesis. Okay.
All right.
And then another. What do you got? Vinny? Is this a specific noun?
This also an organic noun, something living noun. It doesn't have to be a person, but something that would not be inanimate.
This is very
animal thing.
So I believe this one will go to Sleepezi because this is very Final Fantasy VII.
Of course, all living things are important.
A platypus. Interesting.
Okay.
Oh my god!
Is it a bird? Is it a mammal?
In all of 7.
So fun fact.
Is it a mammal?
Fun fact, because I know stuff like this. So being that a platypus is still a mammal, it does produce milk, but it doesn't have milk that comes out of teats. Its milk is actually produced through its sweat glands, which you can in fact turn into platypus cheese.
Yo, I believe we just had somebody jump into this conversation, and then like they literally just jumped into platypus has we're doing
hi
series.
Okay, so all right, so
you could join us.
The theory is, what if Knights of the Round was the reincarnation of Genesis and came here to save the party from a platypus?
I mean, Sleepezi. That's
I mean,
wow.
Honestly, like 2/3 of that couldn't be like too bad of a theory.
Until platypus.
How many of the Knights of the Round are there? The platypus part is obviously the easiest part to say.
I believe.
How many of the Knights of the Round are there?
I think Knights of the Round hit 16 times for 150,000 damage or something like that. So I think there's 16 of them. Hold on, let me check.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of that's a boy
13.
band right there, like a super boy band, which Genesis would definitely fit really well with, and also very good for platypuses. It's obviously those things as one being familiar with one another, but also on the opposite ends of each other, even though they're both mammals.
Maverick brings up a great point. Maverick brings up a great point. The platypus is Sephiroth.
Obviously, that's the full-fledged form of Sephiroth is the platypus, which is what he's going to inevitably turn into at the end of the game.
Because Sephiroth has a wing, so he's a bird and a mammal.
That's right. Yes.
Exactly.
See, Vinny gets it. Vinny doesn't even have to watch the videos, guys. Nomura, Vinny has it. It's fine. He's already got it all figured out. So and then Knights of the Round does an incredible amount of damage, and obviously we'll save the world together. Yeah, save the world from platypuses. Boom, done. Thank you, Maverick. And thank you, everybody, for carrying me through that conversation about the Mad Libs. Thank you. The platypus is I'm going to make something into that in the video. So I'm going to make a little reference to that somewhere. I've already decided. So next video, there'll be a Final Fan TV reference that only this audience will know. So
Cephapus.
Yes.
Cephapus. Cephapus. That is literally the most adorable villain name ever. Cephapus. I would sell that.
As a plush toy.
All right, guys.
Yeah, exactly. I can see the hair now.
How you guys doing, chat? You guys having fun with this, or do you want to do one more and then we'll call it for Sleepezi in this podcast? We're gonna do one more.
some of you devoted 3 hours of your time to this.
I can't believe it. Yeah,
so
we've had people. That's insane. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it. So for the final one, it's a really short one. Just need one Final Fantasy VII character.
Aerith. Oh, the fucking audience.
Oh wait, I mean, I'm cool with that. That would be very interesting for you to back this up. Sephiroth.
Sure, Aerith.
All right, here we go.
Yuffie is the first one.
Yuffie? You guys want to go with Yuffie?
All right. She's also my favorite 7 character.
Yeah. Oh, no way.
It's that group, man. The awesome. Yuffie band, man.
Well, again, because Yuffie, it's not so much like she's a cool character and everything, but like I'm very technical with the games, and Yuffie's Doom of the Living hits like 15 times, and she can do max damage with her conformer, so she actually does the most damage in the entire game. So I use her.
Okay. I did not know that.
She's the strongest.
Yeah, when I fight Emerald, I just go in with Yuffie, and then I have Yuffie use her Limit Break, Doom of the Living, and then I skip the other 2 characters, and I have Yuffie use Mime on her. I put Mime counter, so when she gets hit, she does Doom of the Living 9 times, and then just kills Emerald Weapon in like 45 seconds.
I mean, I want to stick around and see these challenges actually like in play now, because now I'm like I'm learning a lot about other Final Fantasy and 7, so I'm just like I want to see this. I want to see this happen. Let's make this happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was our objective. We're gonna be Vinny's obviously, as you can tell, he's very technical with these games, and it's great to have him on. And yeah, he can do these challenge runs. He knows a lot of the secrets, a lot of those things. So we'll be starting those Let's Plays right here on Twitch soon. Hopefully, still in the planning stages. So here's your final mad theory, and I mean this is a good one because I want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Jenova has actually been in control of Yuffie the entire time.
This is easy. This is actually a layup. This is a layup. The original concept for Yuffie was that she was actually a mercenary, a soldier mercenary, right? And the idea was that she was going to have like a different attribute for each of the like you could scale like one particular stat to make her whatever you want. So if you wanted her to be like a tank or like a major healer, whatever it is, like you could like get these posters around the area and make her into whatever you wanted. So the idea is that because she is a soldier, like other soldiers, she would have Jenova cells in her. Which for me actually would be an interesting way to take Yuffie as a character in remake, since you are remaking it, like have the iconic Wutai maybe being like her birthplace or whatever, but having her be like an ex-soldier party member mercenary, kind of like what Roach would fill the shoes of maybe in remake as well, would be the coolest thing ever. And the lore is there, it's present for her to be that, and then have her get killed because she's like gets possessed by Jenova. I think that that's totally a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, she obviously steals just the party's materia, and it's not for Wutai. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just because she's actually operating under Jenova's influence 100%.
Wow. What excellent theories there.
I mean, that did happen.
I mean, it did happen. We backed it up. We backed these theories up.
It could.
All right. So these are obviously really good theories. You know, please don't clip them. And look what Final Fan TV.
Yeah,
these guys don't know what they're talking about.
We're actually about to get a lot of cease and desist emails from Square.
Sephiroth? Oh yeah, right.
That's right.
Every time we do these,
Nomura's already knocking on my door right now.
Every time we do these Mad Libs, we're like, yeah, we're gonna get cease and desist. Like we had John Bentley actually read his big monologue, and we changed that up real bad. But the one where Vic Chow read it in Goro's voice from Mortal Kombat 10, he read his just explaining the ancients to young Aerith. He read that in Goro's voice.
Oh my god.
So yeah,
this all just sounds like you've been at this kind of stuff for too long. You guys have a stack of cease and desists. That's what's going on.
Yeah, but they all go to Daniel, so I'm safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys. Wait. Okay. Let me just check the chat before we close it out. If you like, I have a couple nice ideas. Okay. So Split Heart says, "Hey, Square Enix, contact me if you like. I have a couple nice ideas. I feel spiritually connected to you."
By the way, all of your stuff has been amazing, Split Heart. It's literally like I've been getting it, and it's fucking hilarious.
Baby Seal says, "In my headcanon, Yuffie eventually becomes a summon. So maybe Yuffie was the one that is the reincarnation of Genesis or something."
And we have
something like that.
Zombie Nug Spreading Sugar says, "We need more of these podcasts. It's like going to a Final Fantasy VII orchestra show. Thank you, guys." Well, thank you for your kind words.
That's a fantastic emote too. Jeez, I want that.
Wow. Thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone in chat for joining along for this first ever podcast. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing these, and we'll be back every Saturday with times. You have to stay tuned on Twitter, where I'll make the announcements on Wednesdays. Also, I'll make the announcements during the community spotlight show that we just started up last week. At the end of the video of every episode there, you'll have the announcement there of who's going to be the guest and what time it's going to start. It really depends on the guest and what's most convenient for them, so I cannot give a set time until Wednesday. So yep, just stay tuned for if you want the written announcement on Twitter. If you want the video announcement, it's going to be in the community spotlight, about a 5-minute long video, just highlighting the community and cool moments, stuff like that. So thank you so much for watching this episode, but a huge thank you to Sleepezi. Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. I had a lot of fun. It's super informative. I love your passion for the game. It really shines through with everything that you're saying here on the podcast and also in your videos. So if you are watching this podcast and you enjoyed us talking and you thought, wow, this dude really knows what he's talking about, I encourage you to go check out his YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the description. Also check out all of his videos. The 5-part structure, the structure of 5 playlist, amazing, insanely informative. And then his latest video, which is extremely entertaining. It takes a twist and tone, and I love it. I love the personality shining through. It's really fun. And it's at the same time maintaining that really informative video. So thank you so much, Sleepezi, for coming on Final Fan TV and talking to us. And thanks, man.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. This has been an amazing experience, and I love what you guys are doing for the community. And I just look forward to watching exactly where this goes, because I'm totally on board. And for those of you who are followers of me, do the same thing for Final Fan TV. They're reaching out, they're doing a great thing for this Final Fantasy community. Be a part of it, and they're doing good work. Thank you for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for being here.
Owen, I'm gonna call you Owen because I feel like we became friends at the end of this podcast.
Yeah, we did.
Thanks, Owen. Yeah, we do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. That really means a lot. Really means a lot for that shout out. Thank you. Vinny, thank you so much for joining along too, man.
Of course. I always have a good time.
Yes. All right. We'll see you next week on Final Podcast. You know what? I'm gonna give it a cool little outro. Here we go.
Oh.
Here we go.